It's no secret now that the state school system all across the Western world and throughout Europe is little more than a vessel to indoctrinate your children into the politically correct way of thinking. This has also involved the blatant sexualization of those children, because the people whom this education, quote unquote, is stemming from do not believe in things like childhood innocence and believe that children are sexual from not only birth, but even in the womb. Those who have stood against this increasing predation of our children have increasingly been called science deniers, transphobes, and all manner of other disgusting and inaccurate labels to unfairly discredit their arguments and smear them as things that they are not. Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. And that is why I felt compelled to sit down with the guest that you're about to hear me sit down with today.
It's dire. It's absolutely dire.
My guest today is the Associate Researcher of Public Child Protection Wales, Mrs. Catherine Watkins, a key figure in the fight against gender ideology, trans ideology, the sexualization of children, in particular through the state school system. How bad is it in Wales with regards to this, the legal system in the state?
It's dire. It's absolutely dire. And until you've kind of, you hear the stories and you hear what people say, but until you're actually in there, it's hard to sort of even fathom that it could be this bad,
Catherine herself has been all over and networked with people all over the world in this worldwide fight against woke governments and their horrendously damaging initiatives.
So we've got them coming over from the International Task Force. So we got Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, I believe, as well.
You've been over to Congress, you've been outside of the World Health Organization with a bunch of other organizations. So you had some people come from Australia, I believe. You had some who were based in America.
Drip, 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 drip. Ever so slowly, that boiling the frog scenario, until we're at this stage now, where you've got
cases where the government have not only tried to take one child out of a parent's care, but both of her children, even when they had no good pretense to do so, and were very, very nearly successful. Can we go into those a little bit? Some of the things that you've dealt with in terms of battling the courts and that illustrating that these are real people fighting these battles as well, real parents that, are increasingly being persecuted by the state. One of the ones we just mentioned had 6 attempts to try and take all of her children from her, if I'm not mistaken. She's also been right there in the courtroom supporting parents of mentally disabled children in their fight to have their children removed from these sexually exploitative lessons.
I was actually a Mackenzie friend that day and went into the court with her, so I knew what happened in the court as well. Thankfully, that case was won, and we didn't set precedent for that, because that could have been crucial.
We not only talk about the really, really dark figures behind these movements, your Alfred Kinseys, your John Moneys, and even your intelligence agencies, but also aim to shine a light on the people whom opposed and fought this from the very, very start. I want to go into a bit more detail about Kinsey, and that'll tie us into then maybe like Hugh Hefner and all of the other things which I want to talk about.
Dwayne Tinsley, his name was, right? They used to have this cartoon in there called Chester the Molester.
Obviously, all of this stuff is very dark. We're talking about some very, very dark individuals. Yeah. It's good always to bring it round and remember that there were people trying to fight this, and there are good forces in this as well.
Yeah.
Who is Judith Reisman, if you don't know me asking? And how, ultimately, this is all related. The pharmaceutical industry, the wider medical industry, the sex industry, how it is all related to top levels of government and intelligence agencies. One of the main targets is your children.
He was given free rein under certain agencies to go in under the MK Ultra project and do these things and then record it. He was a CIA asset as well, see, obviously. He was blackmailing people in the Playboy mansions and stuff, The sex industry is one of the most powerful industries on earth by a million miles because of...
And with government that will stop at nothing to get unfettered and full control over your children, you, the parent, need to be A, aware of what's going on, so you can B, be able to stand against it. I hope today's sit-down will help with both of those things. This is Voice of the Valleys with Catherine Watkins. Enjoy. Disclaimer: nothing in this program is to be taken as medical advice or is to act as a substitute for medical advice from your trained medical professional. Regarding medical decisions for yourself or anybody whom you may be in a position of responsibility for, you are strongly advised to consult a qualified medical professional and not act solely on the information discussed in this episode. Ensure whatever decision that you make of your own volition and with full informed consent. Voice of the Valleys, Catherine Watkins, or Public Child Protection Wales are not liable for any damages or any unforeseen events that could occur as a result of one's decision made with their own informed consent. I repeat, this is not medical advice. Always consult a medical professional before making medical decisions for yourself or anybody whom you may be responsible for. And there we are. Okay. Hey there, guys. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, Mr. Judge Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well, having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. I've been very excited for this sit-down today. Very, very excited for this sit-down today. Have Mrs. Catherine Watkins with me, who is associate researcher for Public Child Protection Wales.
I am, indeed, yeah.
As far as I'm aware, first got started and basically got cancelled on every platform that there was. And if you can hear that in the background, that is my four-legged interloper in the background. I brought Catherine on today because, as you know, I would have sat down with Kim last year to discuss the sexualisation of children through particularly the school system in Wales. You see a lot of the conversation around the school system in America, around elsewhere in the Western world. But Wales and Britain, and with how insidious our governments can be, trying to hide it, trying to push things through by stealth, it's very, very hard to understand the scale of the problem. That's why I reached out to Kim, and in addition to other work I've been doing with Public Child Protection Wales as well, had the pleasure of meeting Catherine, and we had a tremendous conversation off the record the first time about all manner of different things. And given that Catherine, I believe, like Kim, has been through a lot of the systems that are being pushed onto teachers and educators, quote-unquote educators, in the state school system, I thought it would be great to get her on to talk about all sorts of things. We're going to talk about the things that people already know, a lot of things that people don't know, things that people would say that we're tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists about, but I'm looking forward to all of it. Catherine, how are you doing today? And thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me on, George. It's a pleasure to be here. Really, really is. I'm doing very well. Very well indeed.
Good. So we actually had to reschedule this from before due to illness on my part, and then weather concerns that were, I think most people could say, were probably a little bit overblown, those weather concerns, to be honest. Catherine, do you mind just giving them a little bit of background into who you are, how you came to be associated with Public Child Protection Wales, the other work that you've done, and just how basically you got to this point?
Yeah, sure, of course. Well, for me, it didn't actually start with Public Child Protection Wales. For me, it started a long time ago when I was pregnant with my almost 16-year-old daughter now. And, you know, as you do, go into these rabbit holes, and I actually found out about vaccines and the dangers of. So that was where my research actually started back in 2010. Seems like such a long time ago now. So that's where it started. As things do, they progress onto other things. You know, once you find out you've been lied to about certain things, it kind of snowballs, and you go down all these different rabbit holes. And I ended up into the child sex abuse sort of scandals and rabbit holes back in 2017, 2018, and I came across the work of Alfred Kinsey, which is how I then came to meet Kimberly, because kind of at the same time, Kim was obviously doing her work on child sex abuse. She's a criminologist. Obviously, she specialises in child sex abuse. And a mutual friend of ours found her on Facebook. I think it was maybe 2020, and she had seen a video that Kimberly had done. And she was like, you got it. Obviously, the things I was talking about, the things Kimberly was talking about, although coming from different angles, so to speak, they were kind of connected. So this is how I met Kim. And obviously then it went from there, working with the children and whatever. And my role in Public Child Protection Wales specifically, although, we do everything together, is the historical research on the dangers of the sex industry, including pornography, which obviously feeds into what our children are exposed to in everyday life, in society, through the entertainment system, and in school from age 3. So this is why we connected. And obviously I've been working with her since. It's an amazing organisation. The things we're managing to bring about are just, are really great for Wales and obviously wider as well, but predominantly Wales, because that's where we are at the end of the day. So that's how I became, that role became mine within Public Child Protection Wales.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned there about the work of you guys are doing and extending, far beyond the borders of Wales and even far beyond the borders of Britain. You yourself, you mentioned you went over to America. You were going to speak at Congress, if I'm not mistaken, but there was, flight delays and luggage problems, and makes you think, were they accidental or deliberate things?
A lot of people have said this to me.
Makes you think,
yeah.
Right? Makes you think, is there such a thing as a coincidence anymore? But you've been over to Congress, you've been outside of the World Health Organization with a bunch of other organizations. So you had some people come from Australia, I believe. You had some who were based in America, who'd worked closely alongside somebody who you've taken a lot of inspiration from, done a lot of research into, Judith Reisman.
Yeah.
Which we talk about her and her activism, her work in combating the sex industry and pornography industries a little bit later on, when we get into the real seedy world of how that is, and also how it ties together with other industries as well, which is, when I was on stream last night, I kind of had this big moment of, how didn't I realize this, when you were explaining about how it could be linked with the medical industry, about how, again, you mess up kids and then they need in medicalization treatments, whatever it is, usually in form of, I would imagine, like SSRIs and other kind of drugs for the rest of their life, because you've messed them up on pornography. And I'm like, wow, that's, and potentially the involvement of other things as well, like intelligence agencies. But you mentioned, the work that you guys have done. I suppose that's where we'll get started with. For the guys who were on stream with me last night, you will have known that we went over some of the work that Public Child Protection Wales, Catherine and Kim, have been involved in. I won't say the names of the people just on this podcast yet. You can go find the videos in question, or they're public on Public Child Protection's YouTube, which you can go and get down below. Case of a young girl, 15-year-old girl with a benign adenoma, I think it was called, or something to that effect. The NHS wanted to force her into having a mastectomy, and also then the RSE education, the sex education being pushed onto children age 5 and younger. So can we go into those a little bit? Some of the things that you've dealt with in terms of battling the courts, and that illustrating that these are real people fighting these battles as well, real parents that are increasingly being persecuted by the state. One of the ones we just mentioned had 6 attempts to try and take all of her children from her, if I'm not mistaken. How bad is it in Wales with regards to this, the legal system and the state?
It's dire. It's absolutely dire. And until you've kind of, you hear the stories and you hear what people say, but until you're actually in there, it's hard to sort of even fathom that it could be this bad, like the overreach of some of these institutions and organizations is just, it's frightening. And, and it causes a lot of problems later down the line, certainly from a social services point of view. We've got to the stage now where people, their child might fall over, bump their head, get a bruise, they might be a little bit concerned and they want to take them to the doctor, but they won't, because they know if they take them to the doctor, or even send them into school, there could be a referral there, that could end up, it's a messy system. It's a really dangerous system. And some of the things we've dealt with has just sort of highlighted that, especially in terms of the 15-year-old with the forced mastectomy. That was a really important case. And that went to the Royal Courts of Justice, that did, because I'll just give a bit of a background. This young girl had a benign lump in her breast. Straight away, they were talking about having a second opinion. They'd obviously gone and they were saying it's a safeguarding concern. I'm just summarising. There's a lot more that happened, but we can summarise it.
You'll find the link down below, guys. You'll find the link to this video down below. Yeah, you can find the full video down below with Mum, and she actually explains what happened. And I was actually a Mackenzie friend that day and went into the court with her, so I knew what happened in the court as well. But they went really far just for this, up to the, if you want to say Gillick competency, because, they do say that children from the age 12
Gillick competent on the one hand, as long as they, mentally there and whatever, they can make their own decisions. Yet they were really pushing this young girl.
What does that term mean? Sorry, the term
it just means that they've got the capacity to make these decisions for themselves.
Okay.
So a lot of children obviously haven't, but they try and, they use Gillick competency a lot, and they say it's age 12. And it was initially started by the medical industry for this reason.
Gillick competency? I'd never heard of that
Yeah,
before.
Gillick competent it is. So, she would have been Gillick competent. She was 15. She had made, if it was like a danger, then I can understand, maybe she should have had some sort of treatment. But she wasn't saying she didn't want treatment. What they were saying was, we want a second opinion and a third opinion, and which everybody is absolutely entitled to when it comes to a medical procedure, of course.
Absolutely.
You are entitled to that. And they already said it was benign. But at this stage, they'd contacted social services. The NHS had contacted social services because Mum was saying, look, she doesn't want to have it done. We are looking into other treatment. She doesn't want to have it done. And then obviously when a referral goes into social services, they act on it. So what had happened in the end, they in a nutshell, they brought a court case against Mum. Basically they were social services and the NHS because So we went up to the Royal Courts of Justice for this. Like I say, I was in there. And I have been in courtrooms in my time, and I have to be honest, this judge was absolutely fair. He was a good judge. And the 15-year-old was in the courtroom with us. She was sat behind, and it was myself, Mum, and you had the NHS and their barrister, and you had social services and their barrister. And basically what social services were trying to do was put in an order to take the 15-year-old away from Mum and also her 12-year-old younger sister. So they had put in an order to remove those children from their mother's care over this benign lump that was this little girl had, because she wouldn't agree to her having a mastectomy. And if you just put this into context a minute, she's a 15-year-old girl. They'd already frightened her, by talking about, removing her breast, basically, removing a breast at 15 years old at any age is, drastic and frightening, especially on something which is benign.
And was this also the case as well inside the school system? The girls have been taken away to basically be interrogated on what their home life was like. And
so they had gone into the school
at a time when they were away from the parents, away from that kind of protection, to be interrogated and essentially put the frighteners on them again.
Yeah. So then they didn't want to go to school then because they were too worried, which also went against Mum. She couldn't win from that point of view, and it just kept coming. So when we were up in the court, the judge straight away off the bat said, I'm pulling the mastectomy off. No, first of all, he addressed social services, and he said, why have you put in tried to put in an order to remove the younger sister? You can take that off the table now. So they did, well, they had no choice really. And then he was saying, I'm not even considering a mastectomy when we know this is benign. Anyway, this court case went on. It went in Mum's favour in the end, thankfully, because if they had overridden her decision, saying no, her entitlement to say no to invasive surgery that was not even needed, that would have been crucial that would have been case law. Which means that anyone else then going in and saying, I don't want you to do this to me, they could have used that case law to override your decision to say no.
It would have set a very bad precedent.
It would have. So it was really, really important. And, this was a really stressful time for Mum and the young girl, as you can imagine. But like I say, that judge was really fair. He was a really good judge, and he addressed her in the court as well, which was good. And she had written her own statement, but thankfully she did have the second opinion, and they removed the lump without any issues. There was no need to remove the whole breast. But that's what they were going for in the NHS. So it was a really important case. If you want the full details of it, you can see it's actually myself, I think, on there in our conference last year interviewing Mum. You can have a look at the full details of that as well there, which goes into a lot more detail of all the little bits that went in. But thankfully, that case was won, and we didn't set precedent for that, because that could have been crucial. It would have been crucial for other people. So it was really important. The other case was a case that took a long time.
Can I ask one thing on that? Because this was a question I had when I was on stream the other night, trying to figure out what the incentive is keep pushing for this mastectomy as much as they can in this case. With our NHS being like public funded and often being, it's said that it's free, but often being then used to mean free at point of service. It's still paid for. It's paid for, by taxpayer, national insurance, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
What is the incentive for whoever's behind this when seemingly at least up front in terms of like they're not getting a cash thing straight from the parents or whatever? Where's the incentive coming from to keep pushing this? Is it just pure evil, like at the heart of it, or is there other things at play as well?
Well, we asked this very same question, funnily enough, George. It was a question of why are they arguing this? Why is it not just as simple as I've gone for a second opinion, they're saying it's benign, they can remove it without any issues, but you're still pushing for the mastectomy. And not only are you pushing for that mastectomy, you've got social services involved as a scare factor to mum. We asked the same question, and I don't know. I can't answer it. Maybe it could have been something as because she was a young girl and it was, it was quite rare. What the adenoma was quite rare in her age. It's common in older women, but not in teenagers. Maybe they wanted to do some sort of experiment or something, because, like you say, what is the incentive behind that? We asked exactly the same question. We didn't ask them. We sort of pondered between us. What could have been the reason why they were going for it? It should have just been an open. They wouldn't even release her medical notes for a long time to the new second opinion, which meant why all the secrecy? Why are they doing this? I really couldn't answer that question. But as just a personal opinion, maybe it was some sort of experiment and they needed to, and they saw an opportunity. I don't know, which does make it evil, of course. But like I say, we don't know what goes on behind there. I can't think of any other reason. I don't know.
think as well that maybe they're using social services as their bludgeon. They want to maybe get the younger child into some kind of psychiatric service or whatever.
Don't know.
It's just one of those things that I was pondering last night. I was just like, what kind of thing? There must be something coming in on the back end or whatever, like some funding or some quota they've got to hit or whatever it is.
That's what we thought, because there is there's no explanation for it otherwise,
Because in theory there'd be no other like financial incentive or anything like that. As I say, it's not like the parent is having to foot necessarily a massive bill right then and there with a publicly funded institution. So it's just like, what's going on?
Your guess is as good as mine.
There we go. There she is.
There she is. Oh, Bailey.
There's the little interloper. She decided to get bored of my slipper. She decided to get bored of my slipper. You're really pushing your luck, you are. You know that. You're really pushing your luck, you are.
She's beautiful. And
she is. Beautiful. But you mentioned then we're going on to the second case that I reviewed, that we sort of went into on stream the other night then, or last night rather, which was the school system. And the question ultimately that we arrived to on stream is, how is sex education appropriate for a 5-year-old? And that there was this case of a mother and father, family, who, due to the child being special needs, education wanted to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, remove their child from certain lessons, RSE lessons, because they were deemed inappropriate. And they had this massive battle to try and, remove their child from these lessons. And they were saying that this education is appropriate for the child's needs or cognitive profile, I think was the term that they used in one of the reports that I read. Can you break this down a little bit for us? Well, you said this took a lot longer.
Oh, this took a lot longer and it shouldn't have, really. So I'll just give you the backstory of that. She is a single mum. The man who was sat with her on the stage is actually my husband, but he did that. He helped her with the education tribunal. So she wanted him to sit there because he knew all about it, basically.
I appreciate you correcting the record on that. Thank you.
So, well, you'll be aware that we took the Welsh Government to court in 2022 over this sex education to get the parental opt-out back, because obviously we haven't got a parental opt-out. Even though we lost that case, we produced some good case law, which we've managed to use in our favour, basically, to help some of these kids. And there are 2 sections in there, Section 41 and 42, which deal with exemptions, specifically exemptions from these RSE lessons. The Section 42, I believe, is for special educational needs. I can't remember which one it is, but it's either 41 or 42, and the other one is for mainstream children. So there is an exemption in there. So with that being said, Mum obviously knew this because she's been following Public Child Protection Wales for some time. So at the time, her little boy was 5. And just to give you a little bit of background about him, He's actually tube fed. He's got autism. He's got he's really, you know, he's severely disabled, mentally disabled, and he's fed by a tube. And it's not because there's anything wrong with his digestive system. It's a psychological thing. He just won't eat otherwise, right? You know, this is what we're dealing with here. And obviously, because it was mandated from age 3 to 16 with no parental opt-out, she was aware that this was coming into the school, and she went and saw the head and the teachers and explained everything. And at first they did treat her a bit like, how shall I say it? Like a bit of a crazy conspiracy theorist mum, right? Even though she was giving them the facts on there and she was giving them the legalities of it and everything. And this went back and forth for a while. You know, she recorded every conversation that she had with the teachers. But it was a bit, you know, she was on her own in those thingies. You'd have like 4 or 5 of the staff there. It's quite intimidating situation to be in.
Probably deliberately designed that way.
Yeah. But she stuck to her guns because she knew she was right. You know, she'd seen everything. She knew that she was right. So she stuck to her guns, and she was really brave to go through that as a single mum on her own. We were supporting her in the background, and they did some really, you know, crazy things like his assessments. We fundraised to get independent assessments as opposed to the ones that were given to her by the school or by the local authority. She put in a data subject access request, which gives you all details of everything. And within that data subject access request, you find some really interesting things that are said between, you know, the organisations dealing with it. And because the little boy was on an IDP, an individual development plan, being special needs, obviously you've got the LA involved and you've got the school involved, and lots of people, different people are involved, CAFCAS and all sorts of people. And they obviously talk to each other about things. So all of that information came back about, you know, there was even an email in there where obviously mum had been saying she'd been given the legalities. She was taking them directly from the case law. So it was completely legal. And they were saying things like, oh, just tell mum this, to basically shut her up. And this came from the government, this was, right? So she had all of these emails, right, that were, you know, basically saying, oh, just tell her this, kind of fob her off type of thing, you know, even though they knew it was legal. Anyway, this was going back and forth for a long time. In the end, we went for an education tribunal. So within that education tribunal, it was kind of a half win on there. She managed to get as far as I'm aware, she's the only one in the UK, or it's Wales, I think, definitely, who is able to see, she's court orders to see the resources before they're taught in the classroom. Now, anyone else will have that's what I mean. It's taken, bearing in mind, this little boy doesn't even eat. And yet he takes things really literal. Like if he's told you can be a girl if you want to, he will think he has to be a girl. In fact, he identified as a cat, Sally the cat, and he was serious as well. You know, it was like, so with him, his literal thinking ways, then this was it's highly dangerous for any child, but for a special needs child who thinks in that way, even more so. So she is able to see all the resources before they go in. And this mum, bless her, she is actually, I mean, over time, even the teachers started to kind of see where she was coming from. You know, at first they were really standoffish, but afterwards, when she fully explained things, they could see. So to the point where they were showing her these resources and she was telling them why it was dangerous, and they were agreeing and decided not to teach it. Now in that, she actually safeguarded a whole class, a whole school. Their parents are none the wiser, but she managed to do it by pointing it out. So I'll give you an example. So he was, I think maybe 5, 6 at the time, and they had like an alphabet, A for apple, B for, you know, ball, C for whatever, S for secrets. And she was like, why would you? Because you could have S for sandcastle, S, you know, we're talking about little kids.
S for usually sugar. The one that you go to.
We're talking about little children here, and they were talking about good secrets and bad secrets. Now, this is where the little subtle things come in, where it's so dangerous, because from an abuse point of view, more than 90% of it is the grooming process. It's not violent, right? Especially at first. So telling a small child that they are actually good secrets is a groomer's paradise. Because you could, from a groomer's point of view, this is a good secret.
It's literally what they
what they do.
What they use.
What they do. This is their modus operandi. Like, they use these things and they're teaching them in school. So she managed to, like I say, safeguard the whole of that school. And there was another one as well where they were doing the gender ideology. And what they were doing was using, it was like a chime. And once this chime is rang, the children had to stop what they were doing and listen. Now, this is a form, when you dig deeper, this is a form of hypnosis, right? And what they were doing is, well, they were going to do was use this chime and then teach these children the gender ideology. So you're kind of hypnotizing them.
Is it kind of like a Pavlovian conditioning kind of thing? They do like Pavlov's dog. Is that essentially what we're talking about?
That's what I thought when I saw it. And I was like, wow, this is some serious... Because on the surface level, for anyone who's sort of not looked into that, they'd think, oh, well, it's fine, it's just a chime. But when you go on a deeper level and you understand the mechanisms of how that works from a propaganda and a conditioning point of view... The psychological conditioning, yeah. Highly dangerous. So this is for like I say, 5-6-year-olds. So she's still, so every term she's able, and he is pulled out of those classes. But together, you'd think that'd be simple. You'd think you could go in and go, right, I don't agree with it. I don't want you to teach my child this. And it should be a matter of, okay, but it's not. You've got to battle them.
I don't want you doing this voodoo magic on my... You can imagine they brought in like a voodoo witch doctor, but, have you got a parental opt-out for it?
I know. It's crazy. And it actually falls on the headmaster or the headmistress, and they don't even realise it. So, in the courtroom, that's what it is down to them. But they just pass it on to their legal department, who pass it back, and it's like playing letter tennis a lot of the time.
Pass the buck.
Passing the buck. But they don't really want to do it because they know if they do it once, they're going to have to, do it and they want all of these kids to learn this. So another trick that they use as well, in England anyway, in Wales is mandatory. You do have to fight it, but but in England, what they've done is they said, well, the sex part is this relationships and sex education. The sex part, you can take your child out, but you can't take them out of the relationship part, which you think, oh, all right, then that's fair enough. But they put the sex bit in the relationships. So because it's called a whole school approach, see, George. So what they do, it's not like, when I was in school, it was like PSHE or something, and it was 1 hour every 2 weeks.
That's what it was when I was in school, right? PSE.
Whatever.
I think it was like personal social education or something.
Personal hygiene and social education, something like that. And I never used to go, and I used to skip that lesson, but it was something and nothing.
Yeah, you'd have like the odd topic. There was one topic on, there was one lesson on it with regards to sexual health, but you'd have like a bunch of other topics.
It wasn't just that. It was other things as well. There would be
one that was on racism. There would be one that was on euthanasia, I can remember. It was all these other little topics.
I don't really know, because I don't think I maybe got a one in maybe 2 years. I didn't go.
I was too much of a goody little two-shoes in school.
It was a nightmare.
At least with regards to going to lessons and stuff.
So I didn't go, but it would have been the same probably when I was in school from that point of view. It wasn't just sex, it was other things as well.
Yeah,
it was
and that's why I'm like trying to understand how much it's changed. I think it was my generation, I think, was the generation that was like just missed it.
Yeah, and then it came in after that, and they kind of drip fed it a little bit. So I'm trying
to wonder what the hell are the kids going through, and some of the things I'm being told now is...
And this is the issue as well, because like a lot of people are trying to relay it from when they went to school, trying to compare it, and I'm like, it's not like that. It's not the same as when you were in, because some people are like, oh, it's just like what we did. No. It's really not. It's a whole new education. It's global. It comes from America. The whole of the Western world have got it. It is everywhere.
This is from the World Health Organization,
under the World
UNESCO.
And UNESCO. So we're all singing from the same. We might have slightly different curriculums, but our framework, because we're all under the World Health Organization and UNESCO.
It's slightly different fruit, but of the same poison tree.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we get, like in Scotland, they have somebody to write their curriculum. We had Professor Emma Reynolds in Cardiff to write ours, who she's mad into gender queer, and it's just...
We touched on her, me and Kim did in our first conversation.
Yeah, so she wrote it for Wales.
I know they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but...
Have you seen some of the videos she does?
Oh, just her. Just her. Just where you go typing
what
it
you would expect type of thing. But this woman doesn't believe in childhood. She doesn't believe in childhood innocence. She believes, as do others, that child plus adult equals okay.
Yeah.
So there's no boundaries there at all. And that's the woman who wrote our curriculum based on the framework of the WHO and UNESCO.
And I asked Kim this. I was like, I'm trying to work out, because I'm thinking like, this is happening. What was her upbringing like? What was things like for her when she was growing up? All of these things. How did you arrive at this point? I'm wondering, is this somebody whom I feel sorry for, or is this, and that doesn't change the solution to remove all this stuff and
I know
understand
what
where
you're
it's coming
saying.
from.
I know
But
what
do
you're
I
saying.
actually like try and like see this person as, you know, somebody who can be helped and that I should feel sorry for and try to help, or is it a case of
as a victim type of thing? Well, that's the thing. She's probably been brought up massively desensitized in that way, and she's not the only one, because a lot of the children are being too. They're being totally, and that's the point. They're being totally desensitized to it.
It's like you see the biggest abusers are people who've been abused themselves, just make you think that all this is coming from her. What happened to her? And then it's like you see that and you're like,
it's almost like she's kind of bred into a lot of them are bred into these positions because they need to have this influence to cover a whole host of things. And it's the scary thing for me, George, is that I see it working, like even in subtle things that people might not even think of until I say them, perhaps. But anyway, anyone over my age anyway will realize it. You look at how young girls dress now. Right, it's not fashion. It's done on purpose. There's a reason. It's very hypersexualized. The society is very. It's not just school. The entertainment, all of it was done intentionally. Every single bit of it.
Brooke Shields' name will be coming up a little bit later in this conversation.
Yeah,
because
well,
that
she was
shocked
only
me.
10.
That shocked me when I found out about that. I found out about that.
There's a lot of, and all of it is connected. See, so where my work is obviously goes back. That's how I make these connections. But that's what I see. Like I see the fruits of what these people planted a long time ago, and it frightens me to death. Honestly, it really, really does, because a lot of, and what's more scary, I think, is the desensitized adult who doesn't see it, because a desensitized adult doesn't think there's an issue with it. That's the biggest problem we got. There's a lot of people who don't know, and when they find out, they're like, what on earth is going on? And they want to do something about it. But on the other hand, you've got a lot of people thinking it's funny and, you know, it's fine. And it's like, I don't understand. Get something
by pawning their children off on the school system, like they pawn them off on their phones or whatever else.
Yeah,
they just don't
not
want to
realising the danger they're in.
They don't want the stress, you know what I mean? But
it's intentional, all of it.
They need it because kids are absorbing whatever is pretty much put in front of them, you know what I mean? And
which is why it's dangerous.
You've talked about how, you know, you went through the whole period of homeschooling, keeping your daughters out of school and prohibiting things like social media and all of these things.
Yeah.
And actually, the battles that you had, which I think we'll want to touch on a little bit later, if that's okay, the battles that you had during, like, you know, youth and like adolescent period, stuff like that, but how much it pays off in the long run. And
I didn't even have a battle. I think I was lucky because she wasn't in school, so she had no peer. Like, if she was in school, I probably would have had a battle. And people I know who've tried to do the same will have a battle because their kids are in school. She didn't care. Only once she asked me, could she have a phone? And that was when she was 10. And it was only because my nephew had one. And I said, you're not having a phone. That's the only time she ever asked me. It was me who bought her the phone when she was almost 15, because she was going out with her friends and things like that from church, because we're Christian. So she goes to church and she was going out with her friends. And I wanted to know where she was. So it was me. But by that time, I'd already educated her then on the grooming process and why she wasn't allowed to have a phone. And because she was a little bit older, she understood. So that's paid off for me now. Don't get me wrong, I probably would have had a different story had she been in school. So I feel parents' frustration when they know this issue, but they're at loggerheads with their kids because all their friends have got one. It's that classic example of peer pressure and how peers behave with each other. And it's really difficult for a lot of people. I was just really fortunate with mine because of the way I did it, you know, and the way I explained it. So now I don't have an issue with it at all, you know. I know she doesn't go on any social, she doesn't want to, which is great, you know, because that period sort of 12, and I have an issue with this as well, you know, with parents allowing their kids on social media because, for example, I use my social media to expose and it's horrific stuff that I have to expose. Don't want to trying to expose it without re-traumatizing or without children seeing it is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, George. Because I know, so for example, some of my cousins have got children who are the same age as my daughter or a little bit younger, and they're on social media. I know they can see my page, and I'm writing things about pornography, like really explicit things that.
So how do you warn people of the dangers without necessarily exposing them and showing them? Yes, exactly.
It's so hard. It's really, really difficult.
Especially with children, because obviously with adults,
it's
more
with
rational
adults.
capacity, they can obviously discern that for themselves. With children, it's a fine line. It's a very, very fine line. And obviously, you're realising then, to bring it back to where we were before with the whole school approach, that obviously the whole school is now tailored towards all of this, for lack of a better term, exploitation.
Yes.
Exploitation disguised as education. And it strikes me a little bit when you said about how much of it is the grooming tactics, like 90% of it being the grooming tactics. It kind of reminds me of the quote, which people often use, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. Is that kind of what's going on here? It's like there's just all these little processes which are like just sharpening the axe, which is like these little, and gradually then forming into this. Well, later on, when the tree comes down, that is like the fully indoctrinated child. That is
and they had to do it like that because otherwise we would notice, wouldn't we? So it has to be
like the frog in boiling water.
Yes, exactly that. Once it's too late, it's too late. There's a lot of people, they look at this stuff and they think it's just happening now. I'm like, no. This has been we're very, very conservative before a certain time, right? All of us, or at least the majority of us, right? Society as a whole, they drip since Kinsey at least, drip, ever so slowly, that boiling the frog scenario, until we're at this stage now where you've got kids who want a double mastectomy because they think they want to be a boy, or they've got young adults, young children on watching porn, and I mean young children watching pornography, acting out on each other. You've got all of this sort of stuff now.
That's literally what John Money did, didn't he? That was literally what John Money did with the Reimer twins.
John Money is a big influential person. He's another one as well that people haven't got a clue who he is. But from the gender ideology point of view, John Money was probably one of the most influential out of the lot of them because of what he did to the Reimer twins, which was horrific.
So what is this actual whole school approach then, and how does it actually differ from what we had before? We talked about we had the 1 hour every 2 weeks, whatever it was. How has it changed now?
So we had a standalone lesson. So we had that PHSC, it was on a Wednesday afternoon every 2 weeks, and that was on our timetable. The whole school approach, they teach it all the way through the curriculum. So whether you're in geography, whether you're in history, whether you're in science, English, even maths, they can throw these. So for example, like I was looking at an example the other day and I thought this is ridiculous. It was and I thought, how are they getting it in maths, for example? In history, I know how they're going to do it. They're just going to go back to the whole LGBT thing. They'll do it that way, right? They'll cleverly get it in there.
Yeah, the Vikings and the pagans had pride parades. Like.
I know. It's ridiculous, but they can kind of do it. Even geography, you could say, well, where in the world you can squeeze it in there. But I was thinking, how do they do that with maths? So I was looking at an example of that and I thought, wow. It was something like, like we had it, John has 20 apples and, Kirsty takes 10. How many apples?
Yeah.
The one thing I saw and I thought, it's just so unnecessary, but it was in it. John is non-binary.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
He has 12. And I'm like, that's how they kind of, to get it into maths, that's the sort of shit that they're doing. I know, it's ridiculous, but this is what they're doing. So it's a whole school approach. So even when you think you're taking
Tiffany
your kids
stole
out...
10 dilators from John's stash of 50. How many left?
That's how they're doing it.
Express it as a fraction.
That's how they're doing it. That's how ridiculous it is.
And
how sneaky it is. Do you know? But this is what I mean, even from and I used to make this argument as well, from a opt-out point of view, once you get to a certain level, even if it's very difficult to opt out when they're doing it in all. That's why they've done it, I think. Yeah. Because they go like, you can kind of opt out by going through all these processes. They've made it really hard, but we're going to do it in English anyway. Do you know what? So there isn't a like you couldn't say, all right, we're having our... Sometimes they tell them when they're having it done, they might have a whole day of it. But then other times it's in... Do you see what I mean? They've been very, very sneaky about how they've done it, purely because they know how people will react off the bat. That's why they've done it like that. It's very sneaky. And that is why home education is massively on the rise. Not just because of this. There are a lot of other reasons as well. But this is one of the main ones.
Oh, completely understandable.
Even though the government won't say that. They're like, well, we don't know. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. You just don't want to bring attention to it, And
I'm thinking now back when I was in school and how much they would put... Like I look at the whole school system back when I was in it now a lot differently to how it was. They were grooming us into digital ID when we were in school. And you wouldn't have known it, mind. In the first, we were in year 7, so we were probably like the guinea pigs, if you will.
Yeah.
They changed the system in the canteen. I can't remember if I spoke about this with Kimberly, but I did speak about this with Victoria Rickson, ex-NHS midwife and whistleblower. they changed the system in the canteen so that instead of going up and paying your money, it was a fingerprint. Yeah, you put money into a box and it's linked to your fingerprint. You pay with your fingerprint of the thing. Now, a child's not going to know.
No, they'll just do it. That's just what it is, isn't it?
A child's not going to know that, oh, yeah, when you're in your 20s, when you're in your mid-20s, this is now going to form the basis to which, if you have the wrong political opinions, then you're not going to be able to do this.
They wouldn't know that.
But this way, they're pushing it in, and just people had no real idea of what it was actually paving the way for. A little bit like, all of these concepts coming in with like the whole school approach, people not realizing the whole thing of what it's been paving the way for and what the things come before it have paved the way for. But yeah, no, it's just to give you an idea as well, ladies and gentlemen, because I lost my train of thought a little bit. This All About Me thing, what was the age range you said that this All About Me thing was for? This was for age 5.
Yeah, 4, 5.
And this was in 200,
either 241 or 51 schools in England. This went round. This was about
I covered
6
this, by the
years
way,
ago.
if you saw this, ladies and gentlemen, in my conversation with Kimberly Isherwood. It's a extract for something called All About Me, and I'll put it up. I'll put it up a little bit closer to the camera so you can see it. But if I remember, I'll put it up as a thing in post as well. It is for your information, should you need it, to remind children of the rules of self-stimulation. And this is one of the ones that is highlighted on here. It's in black and white, but some of the things that is highlighted on here. Lots of people like to tickle or stroke themselves as it might feel nice. It is something we should only do when we are alone, perhaps in the bath or shower or in bed, a bit like picking your nose. It's certainly not polite to do in class when everyone is watching. This is the kind of stuff that's going out to children as young as 5, And when we say that, these organizations are trying to get kids to do things which many people say are shameful and, is indoctrinating them into thinking that it's normal, the sexualization process, it's literally written down. It's literally written down. Some of the other things I went into as well was the UNESCO guidance. I've got it all under here as well. That this is like a pamphlet, like an advertisement. When you look at it in other forms as well and you see it in a tabled presentation, it really starts to sink in a lot differently. And Kimberly actually said it was that one as well, something we only do when we're alone.
It's dangerous.
It's actually dangerous because it can cover up cues
abuse.
which you'd otherwise get for abuse.
Well, children that age, when they're being abused, they usually act out in a certain way, which we want to see. So if we see it, we know that there's cause for concern. But what that lesson resource there has done is turn all children into not doing it in public. Do you see what I mean? So what they call a non-verbal disclosure.
This is where you see an example of when it's put out in tables, ladies and gentlemen, in a much more, professional, like you would see at like a board meeting.
And that's real. From the World Health Organization document, obviously, where the framework for the whole school approach came from, UNESCO. And it's a very similar one in the UNESCO document as well. That's called the Matrix document, that is. And obviously, if you have because the framework comes from the World Health Organization and UNESCO, and then obviously each country tailors a curriculum based on that framework. So it'll give you, in that matrix document, the age of the child, then it'll give you the information fed into the child, and then the skills and attitudes that the child should acquire from that. So, for example, they got 0 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 15, 16 plus. And that is in the 0 to 4 self-stimulation or masturbation. It's actually masturbation, it says in there. And they've changed it to self-stimulation because they think it's more palatable, but it's exactly the same thing. Early childhood masturbation, that's what they call it in there. And that's 0 to 4. They believe we're sexual from birth.
I'll just let that sink in for you a minute, ladies and gentlemen. Just let a nice little time just to let that sink in again. Because again, it can never be reiterated enough. This little bit by ear is it's important to retread over that ground, even though I went over it with Kim because of how it ties in with everything else. And this can't be, I go on about it all the time, this can't be talked about enough.
No, exactly. No, it needs to be talked about. Yeah.
It's children's safety. This cannot be talked about enough. And with everything that we've heard now, so, pardon me a sec. We had the example earlier of mastectomy with the NHS, example of really how far the state will try to get access to your children, which if you've read 1984, ladies and gentlemen, you know that is the whole gambit, right? That is how they keep the regime going, is they get control of the younger generation and they perpetuate that. They perpetuate the revolution in their minds. So you have that, and then if the parents decide that they're going to get in the way either, what happens in 1984 is they remove the parents. In this case, usually they try and remove the children. Yeah. That's what tends to be manifesting in reality. But then we had the school system, the RSC, the special needs child and the loopholes and not the loopholes, what do you call it, the hoops that she had to jump through and all of this stuff, how difficult they make it, the actual things that children are being taught, all of this stuff. A parent, just with regular faculties of thinking and logic and compassion for their child and want to make sure that they're safe, is going to be looking at this or listen to this likely in horror. You've been an example of how to make this work. People will say, oh, no, you can't homeschool, or we can't homeschool for whatever reason, whether it's, a lot of people stuck between rocks and hard places with, income and stuff like that. A lot of people now having to rely on both incomes from a household, all of this kind of stuff, which again, get people focused on having two-income households. Oh, all of a sudden, nobody's at home to educate the children. Nobody's at home to take care of the children.
They did it.
Straight into the state education system. Exactly. And you leave them with the state for the equivalent of an entire working week, essentially. Who's actually parenting the kid?
Yeah.
So you've been an example of how you've actually been able to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
What's some of the things that either maybe little bits of advice or things that you've done to actually make this work that parents might be wanting to consider that route now themselves?
Well, do you know what? It's actually, it's a bit of a two-sided thingy here, because it's easier now, but it's not at the same time. So what I mean by that, I know that sounds really contradictory. When I took Grace out of school, it was a long time ago. It was like 11 years ago. She was 4. She only did nursery. I took her out after nursery. And it actually wasn't to do with RSE. It was just because I knew the education system was crap, basically. And bearing in mind, my mum was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, my grandfather was a headmaster. I come from a teaching family. So you can imagine the backlash I had actually when I took her out. But it wasn't for that. It was for other reasons. But at that time, when I was looking at statistics and whatever, it was very slowly sort of rising up, home ed, for different reasons and whatever. And you kind of didn't have so much of a backlash. It was easy because you're allowed to do it. It's perfectly legal to home educate your children. You just if they're already registered with school, you deregister them. It goes to the education department. Someone from the education department, the local authority, will come out and make sure you've got a good space for everything and whatever. I'll see if you need any help. And then every year, then you can either give examples of work or written reports or things like that. But now, because so many people have taken their children out of school, they've now brought in the children's school bill, right? So they'll use safeguarding concerns and things now to try, because they want all those children in school. Number one, they don't get funding for them anymore. Because it's like, I think it's £6,000 per child per year, £12,000 for a special needs child per year if they're in the school system. If they're not in the school system, they're not getting that. Where
does that funding come from? Do you know? Where does that actual funding come from?
I don't know. I don't know where that funding comes from. It'd actually be interesting to find out, wouldn't it? So they don't get the funding for it. The other issue is they not need them all the same, right? So they need them back in the school system. So from that point of view, from what I'm hearing from other home educators, they be coming down quite hard and they're getting a little bit, starting to push a little bit, using that overreaching. And I've dealt with a case with a home educated mum. Again, that took a year, went to court, we won the case, but it took a year, shouldn't have needed to. But that's besides the point. But in terms of what I mean by easier now is for those people who think they can do it, and I totally understand that. The whole point was to make sure that both parents were out or split the family unit so there is only a single parent, so you're not able to do that. This is all intentional. But that aside, because there are so many people doing it, they're all starting to help each other. So if you think, right, I've got to go and work, but my child would have benefited from going to whatever they've got on for that day, where they go to... Because they in their social groups, we're starting to help each other from a home ed point of view, home education. There are people running groups in like halls and things. Do you know what I mean? They're running science groups. And these are mothers and fathers, essentially. But they bring in, or they'll have like a day down in TechnoQuest, or do you know what I mean? But they're all helping each other. So if you are a single mum, if you join these groups, these home ed groups, and you want a home ed, get involved with the situation, and people are helping each other out. It's like a proper community thing now, and I'm really loving it. I mean, it's different for me now because my she's doing a couple of her GCSEs this year. She's kind of away from that because she's older. But when she was younger, and you do actually get help. People think don't get me wrong, they're not going to give you that. Technically, they should be giving you to educate your child. They should be having that £6,000, but They don't do that.
Mm.
But you do get things like, so you only got to ask. So, for example, the bowling alley down in Cwmbran, right? We had when Grace was a young teen, we were like, what should we do for the teenagers? Let's do something so they can sort of together. So we went down and asked them, and because when the kids are in school, they got nobody coming in really, so they will do things they'll offer a massive discount. So for example, once a month they would meet up and all the teens, like from age 11 to 16 or whatever, go bowling. It was £2 a child. Whereas normally you'd be spending 20 quid on one game, do you know? Or if they want to go to Techniquest, they have one day every month for home eds. The child is like £4 and the adult gets him free. Now, I looked online to see how much it would be if myself, my husband and my daughter went on a weekend, and it would have been about 28 quid. So all I paid was £4 for her to get in, and me and Darren got him free. And the castles, if you were part of Cadw in Wales, CADW, you get in all manor houses and castles in Wales free. Do you know what I mean? There are things like, so your history and your geography, and Grace used to go to Beach Academy and she went to a music. There are loads of things that go on. It's only when you get in the community, though, you see them. Do you know what I mean? So now it's become so big that there is actually help for each other and support, whereas before there might not have been. Do you know what I mean? Because it was too small then, but it's just growing and growing. Like a friend of mine, she's still got younger children, and she said, I came back from, I can't remember which hall it was. She said, you know what, it was full of home educated kids just running around enjoying themselves, socialising and whatever.
And I think the biggest thing is as well, one of the biggest things as well is that parents who might be considering it are thinking, well, are they got to create the same kind of regime that the state school system is in the house? Like, that's what they kind of have to think.
That's another massive misconception. They think they got to follow the curriculum. I've never followed the curriculum.
Or they think, oh, well, that means I'm going to have to spend like 6-7 hours a day doing it, whatever. But like, no, you're probably thinking,
do it any time anyway. It's 1 hour a day is enough.
Yeah, and it's probably set up in that way to keep children in the system for as long as possible. It's like, you go to public school, and it's the thing when I always hated homework as a kid for obvious reasons, but now I'm looking at it different as a parent and being like, hang on, you've had my kid for 7 hours, whatever it is.
Why are you giving them
And now
more?
you're giving them work to do at home when they should be spending it with their family.
Yeah, it's more of that sort of conditioning, psychological conditioning. And actually they did somebody, I can't remember who, so forgive me for not remembering, but they did like a study, a survey, and they looked into it properly about in a normal school day, right, when they took away all the breaks, they took away all the settling down of the kids and the times they mess about and whatever, and it actually turned out that really, and after dinner, they turned out was a waste of time because nobody is focused after dinner, which does make sense. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Kids, they just want to go home then. So the most focused time was in the morning, and as long as it's not too early, you only get about an hour anyway. But when you're thinking about it from you've got one teacher, perhaps you've got a teaching assistant. They only ever used to be one teacher when I was in school, but they have got teaching assistants. Now you've got 30 kids. How much individual attention are each of those kids getting per hour? When you're at home with 1, 2, 3 or 4 kids even, they're getting their attention fully focused. So for example, Grace, when she was younger, she wouldn't even do it. There was no point in trying to sit down with her until she wanted to, right? And then she would have a part of the day where she was really focused. 1 hour, then boom, she listened to everything you say and works at. Do you see what I'm saying? So if they're not focused, even as an adult, if we're bored, we don't listen. That's exactly the same with children, obviously. And I know that because I was one of them as well. If I was in school, I used to butch quite a lot, but if I was in school, I'd be daydreaming out, looking out the window. I was bored. So a lot of kids are like that, but when your attention is focused, they'll listen to anything. The other thing is with home education is I focused on her strengths and not her weaknesses. Because what's the point in focusing on something she doesn't want to do, she's not interested in, she won't listen anyway. But focus on her strengths, she'd fly like that. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I did personally with mine. Some home educators do like doing it structured. And that might work for the child, which is great, but you've got that freedom to do what works for them best, and then they're more focused. And then my biggest...
And they probably enjoy it more as well.
They do. They're happier.
And they probably enjoy it more because it's somebody who they have a personal connection with as well.
Yeah, and the other misconception, I got to get it in there because this is actually a misconception I had as well before I took her out of school, which was the socialisation issue. But it's so wrong. It's so backward because, in fact, a child who's home educated, because they're out here, there and everywhere doing different things, they're far more social, because they could be taught, they could be with babies, or they could be with 90-year-olds, depending where they are and what they're doing. So they're actually more social. In school, like, I knew from being a chatterbox, I was always out in the corridor. You're not allowed to talk. Only on your breaks are you allowed to be social. You've got to shut up and listen to the teacher. So from that perspective, and in fact, there are a lot of companies out there who headhunt home educated children because they know they're better communicators. Because of that reason, because of the socialization issue.
There we are.
It's the absolute opposite of what they say. And I think that most people I think they kind of get used to it now, but I thought home education was just for rich people. And what they would do was pay a teacher to come round to the house for 6 hours a day and do the same thing as what they would do in school. But it's not that. And I think we were probably intentionally led to believe that as well, so that we would just let them go to school. I didn't know anyone who was home educated when I was in school. Nobody.
Yeah, same.
For that reason, I thought they were just for rich people who were, and they just no, they have a teacher come round. They still have their little desk. They still have to do this regimentism, whatever. But it's nothing like that. And I think that that's one of the misconceptions, really, why people, and they also think they can't. There's another one that makes them believe they're not able. They're like, I often get, are you a teacher? No, you don't have to be a teacher as long as you provide the right. Some people get tutors, which is fair enough. Do you know what I mean? Some people get tutors in, especially later on. But what I did with Grace personally is I allowed her to learn through her experiences outside. And she did learn.
What could be a better thing? Say, for example, you run your own business. What could be a better thing for a child having the experience of seeing what later on what a business would be running like?
Exactly.
Than seeing that experience and actually maybe getting involved in little bits of it as part of their education, you know?
And that's what she is going to do, actually, funnily enough. She started getting herself involved with our business. I said I'd, pay her a little bit. And so she's getting involved with our business, all angles of it. That's not just making the products, that's doing the accounts. And do you know what I mean? So she gets all of it then, which is meaningful later on.
And then it was maybe then she could set up another division to the business, or
absolutely,
she could, maybe they go off and create a related business under a slightly different brand. And then, all of those lessons through the childhood and everything else that, let's face it, you don't get anything like that through the state school system a lot of the time, because probably they just want to push you into some rubbishy public service job. You know
which
what I mean?
You won't like a lot of the time, and then you end up sort of job hopping like I did throughout my life until maybe 10 years ago. But all of that time I was just hopping jobs because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was confused. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh, I have to do this. And then I was like, but I don't enjoy it. So, and it's only really when you're doing something you love, it doesn't matter then, does it? And that's what.
And even then, within that, you're going to have the days, like people will say, you're going to have the days where you still don't want to do it.
Yeah,
you're going to have days where you still don't want to do it, but you're doing something which you ultimately find a much greater deal of fulfillment of.
Yeah.
Would you mind giving people a little bit of information as to what your actual business is, by the way, so they can actually understand what it is that you do?
It's we make and sell non-toxic skincare. So we make we do tallow-based and vegan organic. We do deodorants, obviously, because deodorants have got aluminium. They're aluminium laced. They're very bad for you. We do deodorants, we do lip balms, we do soaps, we do body butters, we sell different kinds of salts, and we do activated charcoal soap, bentonite clay soap. They're all very good for the skin, and we're called crap free, crapfree.co.uk we are. So we do a lot of that, that's our business. And, there's a big market out there now where people are becoming more aware of the toxic lifestyles. Not even, most people don't even realise that they are in it, but when they do, they want to hop over. So there's a good market for it as well. So that's what we're going to be teaching great, because there is actually, I don't do the soaps. I do the body butters, the lip balms and the other stuff. Darren does the soaps only because there's an art to it. And if you get it wrong, because of the chemical reaction that can happen when you do, and I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for that. So Darren does the soaps. Grace will be learning how to physically make them all, but also all the other stuff that we do as well, including like the marketing and, the media side of it, which I'm not particularly very good at, to be honest. So I'm hoping that she might be able to help me out with that. So yeah, that's what I do, is the other side of, to sort of subsidise me working for the children, really, because obviously it's a non-paid role, but that's far more important to me than making money, really. Do you know what I mean? But I have to make money to live.
Exactly.
So, and actually it's something I love doing. It turns out to be something I love doing.
And that's why you say that. It's out there. People often say that, money is evil, or the pursuit of money is evil. It's not. You could say the money is like the root of all evil, but it's often what people will do to get it, right? But you're seeing there is also the other side of where you need the financial component in order to be able to support yourself so that you can do those other benevolent
and that's
adventures.
how I look at it, like I don't ever want to be rich or anything.
What's one of the biggest things the government will do in order to get you to comply a lot of the time is to just come after everything you have.
Yeah.
People say that either money doesn't matter, or will often use it as a way to try and get more public services or get more of these things where people have to siphon more of their tax money away and stuff like that. So they end up ultimately the minute they decide to become, political dissident, should we say, oh, where's all their money gone? Oh, it's all wrapped up in the government because of all the tax schemes you funded. So they do it in ways that you won't notice.
Yeah.
Often creating all these different branches of things that really don't do anything, all of these like diversity divisions and all these other things which really don't do anything other than further the same systems that we see going on that are destroying the country, at least in my opinion. But then if you get in the way, well, they just come after and take everything from you anyway.
Yeah.
Like you guys have been faced with that in PCBW, if I'm not mistaken. In opposing the government, they basically tried to come after all of your assets.
They really don't like us at all. It was when we were taking them to court. It was. So it was £100,000 fees, which we had to fundraise for myself and my... I used to work with Liberty Tactics as a podcast, and we did like 3 36-hour podcast-a-thons where we were awake for 36 hours, and we had like Lawrence Fox on, we had like Matt Letitia, we had people from America all, and we stayed up for that 36 hours 3 times to raise money. My husband walked 150 miles up to, we begged, borrowed and steal, but they threatened us. Well, they threatened Kim. Yeah. And said, look, if you don't pay us, we'll come and remove your assets. And so they play in a really, they know, but we carried on and we did what we did because we had to, it was for the children and whatever. And we're not scared of that type of thing anyway. But they really dislike us, the government. And so the media at first, they used to put Kim on the media. They tried to sort of demonize us and then they just stopped talking about us at all, because what they realised were, even by demonising us, they were still pulling people in, because people going, well, all publicity is good publicity, right? So this was the thing that was happening. So even though they were trying to demonise us, when people were doing their own due diligence, they were like, actually... So what happened?
Hang on, you're telling me they're the bad guys?
Yeah. So they were looking, and it was going against them. So in the end, they shut down to the point, George, right? And this is bad. This is bad journalism from the BBC, but we know this anyway, right? Where we had the court case, you had the courthouse there in Cardiff. It was a 2-day case. You had about 300 people outside both days, right, where they were coming to support. We were doing demos and whatever. About a stone throw away from the court is the BBC. Not a single reporter came out of that building. Not a single one, because they were told not to. That's what it is. Yeah. Otherwise, you'd be straight over there. Like, they can see 300 people. There's a demo. What's going on? They've taken the government to court. Hardly anyone knows that we did it. Because they were so good
and that's by design. They don't want people to know.
They don't want people to know. Do you know what I mean? They really don't want people to know. So, and Kim was on, was it Jeremy Vine? Twice she was on Jeremy Vine. So the first time, I don't think they realised until it was and it was live, right? So they didn't realise until like last minute that Kim was who she was. Anyway, they had that Matrix document up. Jeremy Vine had it up, and he let her speak. Now, normally I don't like Jeremy Vine because he talks over people and he gets on my nerves, right? Yeah. So I was fully prepared and I was waiting and I was watching it.
I'm not a fan.
But he didn't. He did let her speak. And then afterwards, they have the call-ins, don't they?
Yeah.
And they had these first two. And then the last one was a lady, I think her name was Sarah or Sally, and she was from Scotland.
Oh, so Kim wasn't one of the callers?
No, Kim was on there talking.
Right.
And then afterwards, they had the callers in there. So, but when it was live, she was on there because we heard her, and she was from Scotland, and she said everything Kimberly just said is absolutely spot on. We've got it. We've had it in Scotland for so. She was the only one. So when they put it out on social media later on, she'd been cut off.
Yeah,
Sally.
Sounds about right.
But the second time was even funnier because they had Mylene Class and Anne Widdecombe and Kim on the live. So Kim, they're obviously in the studio. Anne Widdecombe is the Conservative. You obviously had Mylene Class, didn't have a clue what she was talking about, being the Liberal, right? And then Kim's on the screen.
Yeah.
So anyway, they have this, like, they have this, debates kind of thing or whatever. And then when they put it out on social media, they cut Kim out completely, to the point where even the people who were watching it live said, well, where's the lady that was actually on? So then it was just between Mylene and Anne, but because she was missing, it didn't even make sense. Do you know what I mean?
Did they announce that she was going to be on there as well? Like, did they go on
No,
with
they didn't. So it was only the people who saw it live saw Kim on there, and then later on, some of the people, even their like Jeremy Vine fans, were saying,
Orwellian.
Why have you not put the lady who was the criminologist on you, who was on there live? Do you know what I mean? It was all in the comment section.
Yeah,
I was like,
and
then they've never asked him to go on it, and they again, they don't want her on there.
Oh, that's so Orwellian. Like,
yeah, it's nuts, isn't it?
Unless you saw the live broadcast,
you wouldn't have even known.
Was,
it was just between Anne and Mylene then.
How you can just completely, not literally erase someone's existence, but for the purposes of that publication, for the purposes of that radio show or TV show, whatever it was, anybody that wants to go back and watch that now, then they would be none the wiser.
They won't know the difference. No, they won't know. Only if they read the comments on social media to even know that there was somebody on there. They wouldn't know
that. Obviously, they wouldn't know what Kim said. They wouldn't know who Kim was, and potentially they wouldn't even know that act of forgery had taken place.
No.
You know.
So that's what they've done.
Insane.
They've doubled down. They won't touch her, not even in a bad way. They just like, we won't even mention it, nor whatever we do. They don't mention it.
Well, that's why you guys who are watching this now, if you made this far, need to make sure you share this video. You need to make sure they share this video so that they can't get away with this shit anymore. Because it's absolutely disgusting, the lengths that they will go to. You know, you talk about them essentially being the Ministry of Truth. The whole point of the Ministry of Truth and the story is that they're there to lie. Right? That's the whole point. And that's all that they're there for at the moment, it seems, whether it's BBC, all of the mainstream media, news outlets, and all of the talking heads. You know, you got your Jeremy Vines, even to a slightly lesser extent, your Piers Morgans and people like that. They're just there to, act as containment or
definitely.
to parrot the
deflect anything
the
away from
message and not actually promote true change that people would likely to be seeing it. I like that you said that with going back to the homeschooling thing. I like this, basically people realizing that they can do it better than the state.
Yeah, that
they can actually do it better than that. And I was thinking, like, you're talking about history, and you might be talking about a little bit about Wales history, and like, think about the castles like Caerphilly Castle or Castle.
What better way to learn?
They're stuck in a classroom for 7 hours a day, and maybe they get a quite nebulous trip which they can enjoy to like a theme park later on. You could take them there anytime you wanted to if you wanted to, and then you're like, oh, well, hang on, let's just go see it.
Yeah,
like, let's just get in the car right now.
You're not going to learn better than actually going there and out of a book.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? You're making it disinteresting from the child's perspective. Yeah,
let's just go there right now and see it. Like, but obviously no, if they're in the school system, literally, you drive past schools nowadays, they look like prisons.
They do, don't they? The school like I used to go to is complete. I mean, they've completely removed that now anyway, and it's all new, and it's like this futuristic prison, like massive. And I'm like, it's not to stop kids get anyone in. I think it's to stop the kids getting out, isn't it?
No, stop the kids getting out. And you see then, you have your people like lingering outside and all of those kinds of things as well. You had the odd person lingering outside the school when we were in school. Like, it was like literally one of these like fences with like about that far apart, and the vertical iron bars with a little bit at the top, the little cross beam at the top. Honestly, looked like a prison.
Yeah, they do now, don't they?
Like in the horror film, maybe it's like set in a sanitarium or something. It has the big wide shot of the building, and then the lightning comes down and it changes to a silhouette, and then it comes back to colour. Honestly, you can imagine that.
It does look really sort of. Yeah, no, it's the same with mine as well. It doesn't look. It's like I wouldn't want to be going. And in fact, Crease, even when she was little, she would see him. Obviously, picks up on things that other people say, and the kids walk past our house. Look, we live on a main road, and she'd be like, "This is when she was younger." She'd be like, "Oh, look, Mum, the kids are coming home from prison." She would say, and I would just laugh, like she picked up a lot over the years from us. So she's well aware of how the school system runs,
Trying to get a little bit deeper into some of this stuff now, though, because you've seen it from the inside. Because you basically went as a little bit of like an undercover double agent kind of thing, where you basically got RSE trained.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, you sort of held your nose and.
Yeah, it was a very difficult thing to do.
Especially if I'm not mistaken, you said before you're a Christian yourself, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of this stuff is directly contrary to that. Kinsey himself, famous for his whole goal was basically trying to undo what is often termed Judeo-Christian foundations of society and morality, especially with regards to sexual morality. And obviously then you had the collapse of the family and collapse of society from not long after that.
Oh, yeah.
What is it like on the inside, and what do you see with people that are signing up to, because I always think, I ask him, are the teachers happy teaching this stuff? And she said to me initially, there was like, no, there seems that the vast majority of them actually don't like teaching it, which is kind of reassuring in a way. They might be caught between a rock and a hard place as well. Now you have some of them which are like really on board with it, and that makes it very, very suspect. What did you notice from your time going through the training? The things that you obviously had to like learn, and the things that you saw were coming from in terms of the guidance that we've been through, but the people going through it as well, and the people that wanted to go through that.
Yeah, well, I was actually on there with 12 others, I think it was. I think there was 12 of us in total doing the training, and I was the only one, as far as I could tell. Actually, no, there was a young girl on there who was also a Christian. She was from Cardiff, and she was she was probably in her early 20s, maybe mid-20s at a push. Other than her, everyone else was on there that was sort of like you had an ex-adult star on there. She was young as well, mind, but anyway, she must have been young when she was started in the porn industry. You had a sex toy creator, content creator from Love Honey. You had a guy who wanted to be sexologist. You had a couple of non-binaries. There was an English teacher in there, but mostly, like 99% of them were all for it. And that's what scared me, I think, because I was like, they're not realizing like the safeguarding implications at all. Do you know what I mean? And they're just like, all of it was basically sex positive. Do you know what I mean? Like, listening to the children. Well, when the children have had like really hypersexualized stuff put in front of them since they were like 5, 6 years of age, it's normal to them. It doesn't mean it's normal. It just means it's normal to them, which means this whole agenda has been successful in desensitizing those kids. And what you were going in is reaffirming that. Do you know, the only thing that like they really went with from a safeguarding perspective was like whether or not you use a condom. And I'm like, that's not, do you know, yes, okay, but that's not the only thing. There are these huge safeguarding, massive red flag grooming situations going on, and all you're worried about is whether or not it was really, really difficult. But I'm able now to write my own resources. So
How difficult was it in some instances where maybe somebody would say something and
I had to bite my tongue?
You'd have that thing you want to like either chew the head off or go for them. How hard was it?
Did at the beginning. I couldn't help it, but then I kind of gauged where, like this was right at the beginning, but then I kind of
feel as though you have to be careful not to blow your cover almost?
It wasn't even so much that. It was like, I was like trying to... All I need is to go through that situation to get our accreditation, because I know then I can write the resources, and if they choose, they can use our resources, which would be completely safe from a safeguarding perspective, as opposed to the hypersexualized content, encouraging type stuff that is going in there. So I knew I had to do it for that reason, but some of the stuff that they were saying and I was just like, I had to tune out. I had to like zone out and just
almost like try and meditate to try and take your mind off it. I had to do
something to just, I zoned right out a few times. I thought, because I know I'm going to say something, do you know what I mean? And all I need to do really is get through it. Just get through it, do my assessments at the end, get a qualification for it so that I got that bit of clout behind me then, so that I can actually safeguard these kids. I wasn't going to use any of their resources.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I knew full well I wanted. In fact, they were using the Kinsey scale, and I had that's my expertise there. And I was so dying to say a few things. Do you know what I mean? But
can you just let for the listener, for the listener or viewer, what is the Kinsey scale? If you don't mind me asking.
So Kinsey, in his human sexuality research, he devised a scale, and they call it the Kinsey scale because it was from him, where he had like 0 to 10, and he would have like exclusively homosexual on the one side and exclusively heterosexual on the other side, opposite ends of the scale. And basically he said that, we all lie somewhere in the middle. Do you know what I mean? It's like this scale that's used to decipher what's normal and, whether
a continuum, basically.
Yeah, basically, of where we all are on this scale that he devised from his dodgy, false, fraudulent data, basically. Do you know what I mean? So they're using, I know, 100% fraudulent data.
So
and that's being
somebody
passed
could
on
be
into
like
the school.
75% heterosexual.
Yeah, and they're using this scale as if it's real. And I'm like, I have to just shut up and not say anything. And, you know, where I know full well it's all fraud. Even his work on childhood sexuality is massively disgusting. But even his work on adult sexuality is completely fraudulent too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, people don't even know. Every sex educator today, every single one of them is Kinseyan. I call it the Kinseyan trained, and they don't even know his name. That's how successful they've been in bringing it down so much. You know, you've had all these different people in between, but essentially the raw data is from Kinsey's work. And that is why these people are doing what they're doing, and they haven't got a clue where that data comes from. They just taught, you know, because he got in the whole education system, all of it from top to bottom, and law.
Well,
he changed the laws too.
Indiana University recently, I think it was about 2-3 years ago, or maybe a little bit earlier. I think it was 2022. They unveiled a statue.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
and it's quite fitting. I covered it on the stream the other night, and the person who's standing next to it is this woman that's standing next to the statue, smiling. And you know the thing where you can just see that someone is smiling, but they're completely dead inside.
Yeah,
that's what it looks like.
You have to be.
Their eyes look hollow.
Yeah,
they look like the epitome of. I compared it basically to, you know, the devil, for lack of a better term, will take what is holy and beautiful and just distort it to make it look evil and disgusting. You know, the scene in the Passion of the Christ, for example, where you see that the devil is made to be like this seductive woman, this very voluptuous, seductive woman holding this baby, like, you know, looking like it's the epitome of something that's the most holy, which is like motherhood and something the most beautiful that it can be.
Twisting and inverting.
And the baby turns round and you see this like elderly dwarf, like middle-aged, shrunk down dwarfian figure that's just like, take what is holy and beautiful
and twist
it but in a way that just makes it so difficult to notice almost as well.
Yeah, like, he's hailed as a hero.
In academia, I know. And it makes you think, well, all of this makes sense when you realise, you know, who people idolise and who they view as their inspiration. Makes sense why they're trying to get, you know, masturbation is in the 0 to 4-year-old curriculum. And they say that in Wales, you don't have parental rights, but children have sexual and reproductive rights.
They're right. And it sounds all good. This is how clever they are. So when they say children's rights, you think, well, yeah, children should have rights and blah, blah. But they've twisted that up. So their children's sexual and reproductive rights trump your parental rights. And that's how they've made it.
I just think even the phrase children's sexual reproductive rights
doesn't go, does it? It shouldn't be in the same sentence, should it?
No, instantly it should be something which you recoil at the very notion.
I know.
And it's just like people, I can't go against their sexual and reproductive rights. I'm like, they're 3 years old or they're 7 years old.
It's ridiculous and it's frightening and it's dangerous. It's very, very carefully wrapped up in
and it sets a dangerous precedent. All it takes is, call the social services. The parent is violating, not in the way that you think, but the parent is in violation of the child's it's sexual and reproductive rights by trying to pull them out of education. Go pull them out of the home.
Yeah. And that's essentially where it'll get to, you know, if people are not on the button and on the ball with these things, because that's what they need to normalise. And I always say, look, if they need to normalise something, if they're forcing normalisation of something, then it wasn't normal. It wasn't natural, was it?
If it's so good, why does it need to be forced?
It does, exactly. And that is, they are forcing it and they are so deep. So another thing that was, you know, that I was taught that I had to, and I just like... that you have to go in and sort of talk about these things as if you're talking about the weather, because otherwise the children will coil away. Well, is that not telling you something? If the children is naturally coiling away from these sexual things that they shouldn't know, we shouldn't be telling them. Not so just act normal so it desensitizes them and they'll think it's normal, because that's essentially what we're doing and what society is doing.
That's the grooming process.
That's the grooming process. You groom the adult first and the adult then grooms the child, even if they don't know they're doing it. It's so... dangerous. And if they
happen to wake up, well, send them to the place where there is no darkness, as George Orwell would say. It's horrendous. What do you notice, just a little tangent on that point before I go on, I want to go into a bit more detail about Kinsey, and that'll tie us into then maybe like Hugh Hefner and all of the other things which I want to talk about, and like intel agencies and finishing up with a couple of other things. What have you seen with, like, you've been in the court with people who've been representatives from social services and maybe even social service like agents or people that work for social services?
Only the once. That was the case with the 15-year-old with social services.
what have you gotten from your experience, maybe not just ones that you've been directly involved in, maybe other stories that you've shared about the people that are in social services as well? Are they like kind of thing we see with the teachers? Are they doing this but they don't want to do it? Or do you notice in your opinion?
I would say, in my opinion, a lot of they end up, same with the teachers actually, they end up kind of the real ones who can really see what's going on, they end up leaving.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're kind of left with, quite young people, and they're not all bad. They're not all bad. Some of them are, they really do want to help. They go in there with all the best intentions in the world. I think maybe it's partly down to how they're trained, so they're taking instruction then from people further up the chain, perhaps. I think it's a bit of a mishmash. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mishmash of things, really. Do you know what I mean? A bit of inexperience as well. I personally, I think anyone who becomes a social worker should be at least 30 and have at least one child, because then you kind of know what you're up against when you're just going in and sort of interfering in family life. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes things are going wrong, but a lot of the time it's a lot of malicious nonsense. And things that just because, they don't agree with you doesn't mean that there's any issue there, But sometimes mountains can be made out of molehills. And then there's an issue.
Yeah, take, for example, you look out there now into the street and social services happen to turn up and they go into a house and you see them taking children out, for example. You want the knowledge at least and to be able to strongly give the benefit of the doubt that they're going in there not just with the best of intentions, as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, obviously, but you want them going in there because they have good reason. Those children are in danger. They actually need to get them out. And that as much as it's a horrible situation, that it's, one of those cases where, okay, that needs to happen. The parents are putting the children in danger, abusive parent, whatever it might be.
And that's it. If that's happening, then they need to be removed.
And if you now know, or with the lack of trust that there is, particularly in public institutions, it could be very well the case now that they're going over there and it could just be a parent wants to object to a mastectomy, object to transition, won't affirm their child's new identity.
Yeah.
That's why they're taking the children away. Like we've seen in California, there was a great example of that. That was in California.
What you mean. Yeah, about his daughter becoming trans.
Yeah, and there was another one as well that in Canada, there was a parent... Parents had split up, I think it was. It was a ex-wife wanted to send the kid off for transition. I think it was his daughter. And
that's the one I'm thinking of, actually.
They called him up and said, we're going to pump your daughter full of cross-sex hormones within the hour. And he said, no, I object to it. Not only did they say that he didn't have any right over it, I think he was given a prison sentence, but certainly like tens of thousands of dollars in fines, and he'd been ruined because of it.
Crazy.
It's disgusting. Crazy,
isn't it? It's gone way, way too far. And that's the fine line there, see, with social services. And because it happens quite a lot, this is where the distrust comes in. And then that can even cause an issue because you're kind of standoffish because you don't want them involved for whatever reason. You haven't done anything, but if they... And then it kind of... That whole working with them goes out the window. It's a really...
And in their eyes, it'll make you look even more guilty.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it's like it's a bit of a vicious circle there. Do you know what I mean? It's, like I say, sometimes it does need to happen, but other times it doesn't. And yet it's still happening,
And think as well about the more and more the state overreaches where they're not supposed to, it gives more cover as well for... cases that are going to slip through the net of actual abuse then as well, because they're spending all their resources going after things where it's
the
not
wrong people,
where it's not where it's not applicable. So it's just everything is, the government wants to make you think that everything is fine. From one out of their mouth, they say when people have genuine grievances, they'll say, "Oh no, everything is fine." But then at the other side of their mouth, when it comes time to throw shade on their political opponents, they say, "Well, look at this problem, look at this problem." Speaking out of both sides of their mouth all the time, engaging in this flagrant doublethink all of the time, and it's. It's not usually the big wealthy politicians that end up suffering for it. It's just regular people and families that are destroyed.
Yeah, literally destroyed by it. It's so sad. It really is.
And then I can't remember if we touched on it when we talked about it before, the case where, again, even if it's just it won't be social services going around, they'll get somebody from the school system to take your kid out of lessons and interrogate them as to your home life. It's like, where are you safe? The whole system is set up for, obviously, parents especially and children not to be safe. And I think more people need to realise that. People just
Yeah, they
thinking
don't
it's
know
normal.
until they know someone knows that it's happened to, often themselves, and then
until it happens to them.
yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
It's like, and a lot of people then they'd be like, well, look at this example from California, look at this example from Canada, look at this example from England. Oh, well, that's all the way over there. I'd be like, but the systems are the same.
Yeah.
And the people
they
that want
go
to bring
in
it
for
to
the
you
same. It's the same agenda, you know,
Mm-hmm.
wherever we are, especially in the Western world.
Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest agendas, certainly, which segues us nicely into the next topics, and I got a feeling like Kinsey and everything will be related with this, because you mentioned Kinsey had some prominent backers, if I'm not mistaken, had some very powerful backers in terms of like intel agencies and stuff like that, which sort of backed his research.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of background to some of the things you told me in our initial conversation when we set this up around how Kinsey would conduct a lot of his research and how it basically borders on the torturous, and then we'll get into where he was sort of getting his backing from and how these ideas have transcended all the more into it through the intel agencies and such.
Sure. So I'll just say why he started. Basically, he used to be a taxonomist. He was his expertise was gall wasps. He was a zoologist, and you know, he was actually quite good at that. I will give him that. He was good at his methodology and everything with them. Then he went into human sexuality, and how that happens is a whole other story, but he was teaching in Indiana University at the time as a zoologist, and he started doing this. So we're talking now back in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
He started doing this marriage counts. He was saying that the students were asking him, you know, questions about marriage and questions about sexuality. That was actually a lie. But anyway, he ended up doing this marriage course, and he then wanted to do, research. He said what he was finding out was not what was portrayed in reality. Like basically he was saying what people were doing behind closed doors was far different from what we saw on the outside sexually. Now, bearing in mind, this is a guy who presented himself as a disinterested scientist just looking for the facts, but his backstory is really dodgy and why he was doing it anyway. But he ended up basically putting a team together. He chose the team. He handpicked that team, his very close associates, who they had to go through a vigorous thing to even get near him. You know, they had to be open about sex. They had to have sexual relations with him and their wives. Yeah, he was a closet sadomasochist and he was a homosexual. So what he was doing was trying to basically paint all of that as normal. That's what his intention was. But to the outside world, he was a very good scientist just looking for the facts on human sexuality. So that's what he was looking to do, find out about human sexuality.
Let's face it as well, he's no Hugh Jackman. He's no stereotypical, maybe like your who's the actor that plays like your Ryan Reynolds? Or,
he wasn't anything like that.
Even coming from me, ladies and gentlemen, he's not exactly gifted in the looks department. I'll say that.
He's not, but he was completely obsessed with sex and sexuality and bestiality and all sorts of dodgy stuff. So, you know, in a nutshell, we can go. I'll just give an overview of it. In a nutshell, he wanted to pull data together on human sexuality. So that's what he did. He did what they were called sexual histories. So first of all, he was just doing like colleagues and people who want, you know, sort of volunteers who were coming forward and whatever. And then he was going to collect these volunteers. So he was going. So he's presented to the world as if like this is the average American male at that time, right? But what wasn't known until later on was that he was going to the most depraved bathhouses in San Francisco. So I'm talking about the most hypersexual, you know,
very
homosexual, very, very, you know, and he was going in and out of prisons as well. And he was talking to paedophiles, right? So this was his sample, not random sample.
Yeah,
obviously specified to these, you know, the people, and there was an argument even with another sexologist. I think his name was Abraham Maslow. He was a sexologist at the time, and even though he wanted to, you know, agree with Kinsey, because all sexologists kind of do, he did say you've got a problem with your sample. He said you're always going to get a sample bias when you're doing sexuality. The only people who are going to volunteer themselves are those people who are sort of open about it, which is not a randomized sample. Yes.
Is that the same Maslow, that kind of the hierarchy of needs, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Like you need like food, water, and shelter, and then making your way up towards self-actualization.
It might have been.
Is that the same guy we're referring to?
I'm not sure. But his name was definitely Abraham Maslow.
Okay.
So it might be, could be. But he told him your sampling is all wrong, which Kinsey just ignored. Do you know what I mean? He didn't take any notice of it. He just sort of fobbed it off. But he was told and told by other people that you can't do. This is not how you collect data on this type of topic for that reason. So anyway, nobody knew this, but obviously he pulled together this data and he was going and, he was paying them as well. He was getting his information. He had like 18,000 subjects and he would give them these sex histories, which were coded. So he made so that it wasn't, like if you have a survey and ask like, these sort of questions, they were coded. So he made his staff learn those codes. He was a very intelligent man. Learn all those codes so that if anyone found it, they wouldn't understand it. Only they did, right?
Oh, okay.
So it was a coding system.
Yeah.
So they would ask people, like they wouldn't even assume, they wouldn't even ask them. They would go, "When was your first homosexual experience? When did you have your?" As if they'd already done it. See, so the way of interviewing techniques was very dodgy. Anyway, he was obviously pulling in people. He had good back-ends, good funders. So he was getting hold of these people who he could blackmail as well. If he's got their sex history, he can blackmail them. And that's what essentially he was doing. But anyway.
Well, look how powerful Jeffrey Epstein was.
Yeah, he was another Jeffrey Epstein just before. But he had all these histories and he put them in a nutshell. He put them in these two publications, Sexual Behaviour in the Human Male in 1948. And then Sexual Behaviour in the Human Female was in 1953. Within those human sexuality data, he had childhood data. So this is where Judith Reisman picked it out first, and this is where she went to town on him. In the childhood data, I think you showed table 34. There are many tables in there. Table 34 is just one of them. So when you're looking at it without context, you've got the age, the number, the time, and then the number of orgasms. So the age on table 35, it starts at 5 months, but actually in other tables, it was at 2 months.
Yeah, it was at 2 months, yeah.
So from 2 months to age 15 years and everything in between. So they had like how long and how many orgasms. And when you're reading that without context and you're like, orgasms? These are like, baby, what do you mean orgasms? So when you read in how he collected this information, he called them trained observers. So they were using stopwatches. They were stimulating children and then recording their orgasms. Now, bearing in mind, as I said, these are from pedophiles, right? So basically, in a nutshell, what you're looking at there is data from babies, infants, toddlers, whatever, being sexually tortured, and their response, the paedophile is seen as an orgasm. They even list the 7 types of orgasm in there. And I'll give you an example of what as per the paedophile lists as an orgasm, which is either a biological response or a response to being abused. Screaming, kicking, crying, especially in the younger babes. That's their words, not mine. Hitting out at the...
Literally just referring to them as animals, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's often what
that's what he does. He refers, he's a Darwinist, so he sees human, that's what he sees.
Literally referring to, are we still talking about children here?
Children.
And referring to them as animals.
Yeah, there was one on there, 4-year-old little boy, 24 hours, in a 24-hour period, he had something like 12 orgasms. So what they mean is they sexually abused and tortured a 4-year-old little boy for 24 hours solid and then recorded so-called orgasms, which were things like crying, shaking, going stiff, tongue protruding, eyes widened. And this was turned up later was, number one, how did he get hold of them kids? Right now, he was saying in his publication that the parents were allowing him to observe the kid, right? It was just nonsense. But turns out later that he was actually in the 1940s, puts him right in line with 2 mental institutions, Grey State and Rockland. And what he was doing was electric shock. So basically the babies that he had access to were the babies of the older inmates that were in those mental institutions. And what they were doing was strapping them down, especially the older ones, electrocuting them, and then torturing them. And this came out much later. Like Judith Reisman only found this out in 2021, a couple of months before she died. All the other stuff, we were looking at but it didn't make sense. How did he get hold of these kids? But now it does. It's because he was given free reign under certain agencies to go in under the MK Ultra project and do these things and then record it. But like I say, he had pedophiles, 9 pedophiles. 2 of them were most prolific. You had Rex King. And then you had Fritz van Balusek, which was he was a Polish Nazi, and he was being done for a murder in 1950 something. This was after Kinsey had died, and they found his diaries.
Was it Fritz van
Baluset?
Yeah, I'll find those names later.
You can find him on my blogs. Anyway, there's a picture of him on there as well. And he was being done for a rape murder. He was being done for, and they came out. He found his diaries, and he was Kinsey died in 1956, but this was later on, and he had found the diaries, and they were being read out in the court, and he was recording, him and Rex King, every single detail of what they did to children over the years or whatever, and they were giving that information to Kinsey. They were relaying it, so you had basically the only thing Kinsey told him to do was be careful not to get caught. So he knew, obviously, that these were abusing children and then passing the information to him, and he was using it in that data as well as his own experiments on these kids, right? So this was like, and that's where we get. But Kinsey went on, in a nutshell, Kinsey went on to influence law, education, policy, everything. So laws previously, and that's around the world, so laws previously in place for protecting women and children had gone out the window after Kinsey because of his data, and because we're apparently sexual from birth. That's where it comes from. So the reason that children have got this education in there, you've got the gender theory, the queer theory, and the sexual from birth theory. And they even state it in the World Health Organization. Actually, they say from inside the womb, we're sexual from inside the womb. And it's all based on Kinsey's data of torturing babies as young as 2 months old, and relaying it in a science publication that people use today and don't even know where it's come from. That's where it's come from. We're not sexual from birth.
How does that pass peer review? That's what I like.
It passed because this was the other thing. I was like, how didn't people know? But look, people did know. There were people who knew at the time, but they weren't getting anywhere because he was protected. He had he was funded by Rockefeller Institution for a start. And then he was backed by the CIA. Because I was thinking, when I was reading all this and I was sort of absorbing it all, I was thinking, why wasn't he fighting in the war? Like, why was he allowed to go and do, like, him and his associates? I was thinking they were perfect age for, being sent out to war or whatever. We're talking about in between the First and Second World War year. Like, why weren't they out there? They were healthy men, they were allowed to. And then obviously later on, realizing that they had connections to MK Ultra and CIA and Rockefeller funded. I knew he was Rockefeller funded anyway.
They were needed for other things.
Yeah, because they knew what they were going to do later on down the line. This agenda has been in play for 100 years, probably more than 100 years. So he was just probably the biggest player in it, because he was the one who made pornography mainstream. So he was a sadomasochist, like the things he used to do to himself. Like, he was married and had kids. So from a front, he was like, he's a, respectable man and whatever. But behind, he was devious.
They gave the same illusion with John Money as well, didn't they? Exactly. To make him seem as though he was this dignified professional.
He's just looking for the facts. That's all he's doing. But in reality, that wasn't the case. And actually, Kinsey died in 1956 at the age of 50-something, or 60-something he was, actually, 60-something. But not long before, he used to do some horrendous things to himself to be able to get an orgasm, because he'd obviously numbed himself and he circumcised himself in the bath, right, with his pocket knife without any anesthesia, and he bled out everywhere, right? And then he had an infection in his testicles called orchitis, and then he died not long after. But they'll tell you he died of a heart condition. And I'm just thinking, I don't know, and I think there was something probably with what he did to his body the whole time. And this is the man who is the sole person that people go to for sex education all over the world. He is the sole person, and
without even knowing it.
Most people don't know it. So, like I say, he had such an influence. He used to make pornographic videos, and with his associates and their wives and whoever. He was another asset, because he obviously had a lot of information he could blackmail people with. But then Hugh Hefner took the reins from him, see? So we're talking like in the 1953, that's when he produced his female publication. That's exactly the same time Playboy came out. Hefner himself called Kinsey a god. He saw him like a god. He read the publication, or apparently he read it, one of them, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, and he vowed to become his pamphleteer. But knowing now, they were obviously connected by thingy anyway, because he was a CIA asset as well, see, obviously. He was blackmailing people in the Playboy mansions and stuff, Can
I just ask what pamphleteer means? Sorry, because I know you used that term in a video which I watched last night. What does pamphleteer mean?
he's just like the advertisement for it, if you know what I mean.
His marketing agent, basically.
Agent,
gotcha.
Yeah, and obviously then he was the one. That's when he made pornography mainstream, because that's when the first pornography magazine came out, the one that was allowed to be sort of, around and whatever. And then you had Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler after that. So he was the one who made it sort of mainstream. And we've gone downhill since then. So he was the biggest player in the sexual liberation movement in the 1960s. That free love, free love, everything. And we all thought we were being cool, or the
hippie revolution.
They were playing right into the hands of that agenda without even knowing it. That's how clever this stuff is, And now we're at a stage where this stuff has been sort of normalized to an extent where it's just people are so desensitized by it now, do you know what I mean? Where you would never have been able to do this back in the 1940s. They know what they're doing. They played the long game. It wasn't like...
It was much more socially conservative then. It was much more...
they wouldn't have been able to do it.
Much more stronger foundation of Christian morals for the most part.
And even from the Second World War point of view, they completely demoralized family. They destroyed it, and that was part of it too, do you know what I mean? So that they could bring this stuff in, do you know what I mean? Breaking that family right down, and they did do it. It worked a treat, and pornography has been nothing but horrific. It's had such disastrous consequences for the individual, for relationships, and real world consequences like sex
trafficking. It's been possibly the most damaging drug potentially in history.
Oh, it is. When you look at a brain on a porn addict compared to a brain on a heroin addict, the porn addict has more scalloped from where brain wastage has happened than a heroin addict does. And that's something people don't realise. Do you know what I mean? And it can create offending behaviour.
I just wonder what actually causes that, because with heroin, and I was having this conversation with people that are on stream the other night, it's just so weird with pornography because you can essentially just conjure it up from your mind.
Yeah.
Right? It's just so weird. With heroin, you can at least trace it very easily from source to cause.
Yeah.
So the heroin, maybe the things it breaks down to, its metabolites, all of these things, and then it has the effects on the brain. You could say, physiological cause, input of substance, physiological changes, scalloped brain. It's so difficult. It's with porn, you're looking at something on a screen or in a magazine or whatever it might be. What is it? There's like the photons going back and forth between your eyes and the page or your eyes and the phone, and then I'm just wondering what the mechanisms are that causes it to be so damaging.
Well, they do actually run along the same neural pathway as chemical drugs.
Right, okay. So exploiting the same sort of...
Yeah, so where you need more of it, and this is why it can cause offending. So with a chemical drug, the more tolerance you build, you need more of it to get it. That's exactly the same as what it is with pornography.
More
so that's
extreme.
Why more extreme, or it doesn't work, see? So when they did this... novelty is obviously another thing as well, and this is why we have an endless amount of porn. This is why you get child pornography as well, because it breaks down. This is really, really dangerous. And they did this thing. They did an experiment, the Coolidge effect is called. They did it with rats, and they had like a big, massive tank, and they had one male rat and loads of female rats on heat. And they put the male rat in with the female rats, loads of them, and it mated with every single one of them until it was absolutely shattered. And it passed out or whatever, and the female ones are nudging it, and it doesn't care until you put a new female rat in there on heat, and then it got up and mated with her. So they did it on humans, and what they did is have healthy volunteers, and what they were doing, they showed one pornography picture. Well, I don't know what it was, like just maybe a still picture or whatever. And they were aroused by it until they lost arousal, and then without telling them, they quickly changed the picture or video or whatever, and they got arousal back. They made it stronger and stronger. So it is like a drug. You build tolerance, and that's when you seek out more shocking, violent, whatever. And that's my point. And when I say this, really, really dangerous, when you see little kids, there's a case not long ago, it was in America, where a little girl was beaten into I don't think she died, but she was beaten into an inch of her life. She was only about 7. She was sodomized. She was weed on. She was bitten, spat at. And when you look at you think, oh, it's an adult crazy man or whatever. It wasn't. It was 3 kids, one girl, 2 boys, and they were like 9. And it's not because they've just woke up one day and gone, I want to do that. It's because they've been exposed so young to this stuff. Pornography is violent 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So like a little kid will copy like you'll get a little boy, say, who loves watching Spider-Man, and he's 6 years old and he's running around and he's shooting webs, pretending to shoot webs out of his hands and with his little costume and all on. He's copying that. When a child views pornography, they do the same. And because it's arousing,
because they think it's normal. The adults are doing it, so it must be normal. It's
a biological reaction as well, see, because it's
like as
so
well, like
dangerous.
You gave a great example there, like the Spider-Man. It was like you get caught swearing around your kid, or you accidentally swear in front of your kid. What are they going to do then? They're probably going to repeat that.
Yeah.
I remember the first time.
They copy everything. They suck everything up.
We was up by the car when I used to live with my mum and dad. I can't remember how old I was at the time, but my dad would always go, oh, fuck, and then stop himself. And then just as a joke one time, just to imitate what he done, something happened. I went, oh, fuck, and he too. And he's like, you said what?
Yeah.
But it's like kids, I didn't know there was anything wrong with it.
They will copy you.
I didn't know there was anything wrong with it.
And the thing is, when you've got a child who's looking at it, the only other thing they've got to practice on is usually a younger child or a younger sibling.
A sibling.
And it happens a lot more than people think. A lot more.
Or God forbid them, themselves as well, or whatever else. It's just
and they learn in this behaviour, and they because their brains are not wired. Our brains are not wired until we're sort of in our mid-20s. Then they're wiring their brains in a certain way, and they're strengthening the neural pathways, just like you would if you was learning to play a new instrument. Or the more you do it, the better at it you get. It's the same thing with pornography.
The prevalence of OnlyFans and stuff like that as well.
It's completely normalised.
For young girls as well. This actually leads me into a question a little bit later on, that one person on the stream said that they had sort of a question that they had in terms of the damage that it does to males versus females, and is it different? How does it differ? We had the conversation last night, or part of the stream was like, it's weird how now, as part of the sexual revolution, as part of the normalisation of that activity, with things like OnlyFans, essentially now, young girls in particular have basically become their own pimps.
Yeah.
And they're doing, they get this endless gratification
into it as well, see.
But then in terms of, especially later on, when it comes time to consider, marriage, having kids, all of this stuff, having a family and fulfilling life that way, which many of them may think, oh, well, I don't want that. But, as you know, people say things 10 years later, 20 years later, they feel a lot different. You know what I mean? Is there something about like pornography and like OnlyFans and the related industries with it? So like people make the case of like OnlyFans is technically prostitution. They're basically prostituting themselves. So those kinds of sex industry, sex industry, we'll call it. Have you noticed that it affects like males more than females, or females more than males? Or have you noticed that it can have equally damaging effects, but they manifest in different ways from your understanding
they have
of it?
Equally damaging effects, but they manifest in different ways for the woman.
Okay.
It's a lot of insecurity and mental torture happens in the end, they do manifest. So there was a statistic, and I don't know what it is now, but this was from about 3 years ago, I think. It was 90%, over 90%, 90 point something percent of men and boys, and 62% of women and girls watch pornography. That's a high percentage for women, because predominantly when Hugh Hefner brought it out, it was for men only. But obviously, as time has gone on and things have been desensitized so much, and things have been normalized so much, there's a greater amount of women who do it as well, and it does have really quite bad implications for them too, and they don't see it at the time, but you'll see a lot of ex-porn stars coming out and speaking about it and what it did to them mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Ones that have died as well.
Yeah.
Ones that have died as well, because I was related to other industries like the drug abuse.
Yeah, it's sex trafficking, child trafficking. Pornography is at the centre of it, and it's the one that people don't really think about. It kind of goes out the window a little bit, but it's not. It's actually like symbiotic. It has a symbiotic relationship to sex trafficking, child abuse, child pornography, all of it. You can create an offender by watching pornography. You absolutely can, especially if their brains are being wired. And I always use, and people say, oh, he's a bad example. I'm saying, actually, he's the perfect example. There was an interview that Ted Bundy did just before he was being electrocuted in 1989, I think it was, something like that. He'd been in prison for decades at this point. And he was probably one of the worst, from a serious serial rapist, murderer type. He was really sadistic, horrific things that he did. Mm-hmm. But I think he may have been abused when he was younger, but he was a normal boy up until age 12, until he pulled up. Now, at the time, this was in the 1950s, you didn't even have Penthouse and Hustler. It was literally all that was available was Playboy magazine, right? that's what he got hold of when he was 12 years old, right? And it escalated to a point. Now, when he was in prison, and he says this to the interviewer, James Dobson, I think he's a psychologist, he said, I don't know, he said, because I've been in here a long time, I haven't done a survey, he said, but every single, because obviously they put offenders like for like in prison, so he was obviously with a lot of people who had done the same sort of things that he had done. He said, every single one person that offended like me in this prison, he said, every single one of them without fail, and he pushes on this point, was highly addicted to violent pornography. Every single one of them. So what I'm saying is, not everybody who watches porn is going to be a serial rapist murderer, but every serial rapist murderer watches porn. Addicted to it, every single one of them. Because they become so desensitized.
If they were already kind of depraved and maybe nothing's right with their brain anyway, it just naturally makes sense that they would have this other vice and thing on top, and they would seek this out.
And they will, even people who you know, like, who you wouldn't think, if they've been watching it so much, they can get to a point, like, there's been issues where, like, people have pulled back from it. So there's a guy who used to work for Penthouse, I think it was, and he was like an editor or something, or producer or something anyway. He was young at the time. And he was producing all that, and he said, and there's like a video of him, and he said he nearly went past that barrier where he was at teens, he said, until he found God, thankfully, and he came out of the whole porn industry and said, I'm telling you now, it'll ruin your life. It'll ruin your life, because at first it was all amazing. He was a young, 20s, wherever. He was having all these porn stars around him, and he was loving life. And then all of a sudden it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for Hugh Hefner either. He used to have sex with his dog. Do you know what I mean? He was a very depraved human being.
Linda Lovelace as well. He made heinous things with his dog.
Alsatian. And he was married to Sandra Theodore, wasn't he, in the 1970s, and she came out in The Secrets of Playboy and said a lot of the stuff. Wasn't all in there, but she said a lot of the stuff that had gone on, and he was highly depraved. So was Kinsey. So was John Money. You know, all of these key players in the industry have been massively depraved, and they've all been impotent as well, because that's what it is.
Wasn't it the case as well? You brought up in the video, I think it was one of the videos on your Rumble channel. I think it's called Explicit Materials. I think you called it your Explicit Materials series, I think it's called. It's on your website anyway, but it'll be linked down below, ladies and gentlemen. You mentioned something about, I think it was like a young niece he had, like bouncing her on the bed.
Oh no,
it
was his daughter's 16th birthday,
right?
And she had all of her friends around to the mansion, and he was bouncing one of them on the bed, and she was 16, and he was happy with
bouncing
that.
on the bed being a euphemism for
basically, and he was, but he was untouchable as well, mind, until he died, and then that's when a lot of stuff was usually the case, isn't it? But that's when a lot of stuff came out about him. He was too powerful when he was alive, except for Judith Reisman, who took him all away.
Can we talk a little bit about her as well at the moment then?
Yeah.
Because obviously all of this stuff is very dark. We're talking about some very, very dark individuals. Yeah. It's good always to bring it round and remember that there were people trying to fight this, and there are good forces in this as well. Yeah. Who was Judith Reisman, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, well, she battled the industry since about the late 70s, I would say. She came across it, and she was an academic. She battled that industry for 4 decades, pretty much single-handedly on her own. Now, bearing in mind, the sex industry is one of the most powerful industries on earth by a million miles because of...
Can I just ask what her academic origins were? Kinsey, you said, was zoology. Was hers a similar field? Was it a related field?
No, she wasn't human. I can't even remember. She had a lot of things. She was an author. She had a lot of different things. She might have been like psychiatry or psychology or something, but don't quote me on it.
I was just wondering how she got this interest to then go and pursue this.
Her daughter was sexually abused by an older boy.
Right.
Who had been addicted to pornography.
Right.
So that's how she went into it. That's why that's
how she went down this rabbit hole and started.
She went on the rabbit hole and found it.
Okay,
so that was what happened to her.
Sex industry is extremely powerful.
Yeah, very, very powerful. And there was a period of time where she was so good at what she did. And I mean, she was thorough. The Department of Justice asked her at one point, probably they didn't want to at the end, but they did it in the 1980s, ask her to do like a study or some sort of report on juvenile delinquency after being, looking at violent pornography and whatever else. So she did this study. It was like 2 years long. And I read that. Do you know what? You can't find it anywhere now. It's really difficult to find. I think they pulled it off there, and it was like 3,000 pages. A lot of it was her methodology, but in a nutshell, she had all So this was in the 1980s. So she had 30 years worth of Playboy, Penthouse and Hustler magazines, and she had coders. And even the coders who had to go through and they had to pull out what they deemed as child pornography, whether it was anything in the actual picture or the cartoon, or if anything in the caption was, when they were pulling out and looking at these things. But she had to change the coders every 6 months because they were becoming desensitized. That's how just by looking at it, they were becoming, so she had to change them because otherwise they wouldn't be able to pick it out anymore, right? That's how easy it is. And
they essentially get lost in it. They're lost in the fog, essentially.
Yeah, they get so desensitized by it, and they can then decipher which ones are. So she changed them all, but this was a really thorough study. In fact, they pulled it halfway through, but she managed to finish it anyway, and she pulled out all the child pornography that was in these magazines. And
so literally, pretty much like every single edition, pretty much.
Apart from a few, which couldn't get hold of.
As many as she could get hold of.
As many as she could, and there were thousands of them, obviously, over the years. She got them all. Other than a few, and she pulled out all the child pornography referencing and everything in them. So and she went on, like, I think it was a Dutch podcast, or it was on telly, it was back in the 1980s, or might have been early 1990s, and she basically said it, there's child pornography all through Playboy and whatever else. So he and the pornography industry tried to sue her for libel. They wanted her to remove her comments and take it down and whatever, but she stood her ground and she was like, it would take me to... Nobody really knows about this. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
So they tried to sue her, and they were paying at that point, between the porn industry now, between $50,000 and $75,000 every single month for about 3 years to try and damage her reputation, to try everything. She was up against Congress 3 times, mind. Right. But she still, because she was so good at what she did and she had all the evidence she needed, there was nothing they could do. So she won that case.
No amount of money will stack up to the truth, will it?
No. And she won it, and you didn't hear a peep. I didn't know about it until a few years ago. Do you know what I mean? That's why I didn't know nothing about it. But obviously they wanted to, we won't bother saying anything.
They won't be seeing the BBC reporting on that.
No. But she won. So she was telling the truth, absolutely telling the truth. And she had a brilliant website. She has got a website, but it was... So she had 2. Her old website they've taken, and do you know what? I'm so devastated. I think I pulled some of the information off there, but it was so packed full of information. I had a feeling, it's like, they're going to pull this. Like, it was so intricate.
I think we'll be able to find it on the archive somewhere.
I've looked on the archives. Do you know what comes up now? Ironically, when you put it in, Chinese porn sites.
Really?
That's a smack in the face for her. They don't want you to... But she has got the Reisman Institute, which other people have updated for her. It's not as much information. Still loads of information on there. I would, recommend anyone go and have a look at it. It's just not as much as it was on her old website, if you know what I mean. But you can get her books. Some of her books are free on PDF. I've read, I think, all of her books. But the one I would suggest people go and read, and you can get this online. You can buy it in a book if you want to, but you can get it as PDF, is Soft Porn Plays Hardball. Read that. That was like, oh, wow. That's when she talks about the child abuse and how it can lead to a sexual offending, copycats copying stuff that they were seeing in pornography. In fact, in Hustler, Dwayne Tinsley, his name was, right? He was one of the producers or editors or whatever in Hustler, and he was the one who they used to have this cartoon in there called Chester the Molester. He was the one who created this cartoon character and whatever, and he would be molesting kids somewhere. And these were in porn magazines. And it turns out that he, later on in life, so his daughter, and she was an addict and whatever, right, massively, but he had been abused, giving her the pill when she was like 12, and sexually abusing her all the way through it. And that's why she was an addict, to try and, evade of it all. And he was actually, they went to trial and they put him down for that, but then they allowed him back out. So he did do a couple of years prison for that and then let him out. But he was probably very well, protected to that degree. They probably let him go. There was so much evidence stacked against him because what he was actually putting in those cartoons, he had been doing to his own daughter. It was the editor of... or one of the producers or whatever, and
that was Hustler, though. You mentioned that was Hustler.
Hustler, yeah. So that was later on. That was like in the 1980s and whatever, and he did time for that as well because he'd been raping his daughter since she was 11 years old or whatever it was. And he, there's a lot of dodgy stuff that goes on in that industry that people don't. They think it's all consensual. A lot of them are trafficked as well. You wouldn't even know any different. It's really, really, and the more we watch it, the more we enable it. And this is why, you know, the only way out of it is to not watch it, because there's such a demand for it. They ain't going to stop it.
It's like it's like voting with your money, isn't it? You vote with your attention. Yeah. In this instance,
but so many people watch it, so it's like a double-edged sword, because like,
it's like 180 million.
Oh, it's so it's so much.
It's like
you wouldn't believe. And there's more
billions
now
of watch hours every month.
Because obviously you've got the younger kids who are on phones and stuff, so it's far more than it ever was before.
And obviously then those people who are running the sites want to get at those kids. They want to make lifelong addicts. So that whenever a government, like it's the whole thing in the States at the moment, a lot of states have massively prohibited use of it by linking it to, you've got to provide a valid ID.
Yeah.
So they haven't outright prohibited it. But again,
they will never do that.
You show a valid ID. And the industry obviously massively campaigned against it. Yeah. So obviously at the very, it's going to have an impact. It might not have a massive impact, but it is going to have an impact. But
it's very difficult to battle this industry, I can tell you that now.
Because
some nights I cry myself to sleep because I'm like, this is too big.
And it goes back to the bigger industries of play, doesn't it? It goes back to pretty much, it's all government enabled.
Yeah, of course it is.
Because it's all part of...
Of course it is. They know exactly what's going on. They know exactly what's going on, and they don't do anything about it because they want it to happen, you know? And that's why we have to find out, you know, when people actually learn about it and they realise the mechanisms behind it, and they, you know, a lot of people will pull away from it just for that, because they kind of realise that, wow, this is feeding into this, you know what I mean?
Especially, the thing I'm hoping for is any parents listening or watching this will understand now.
And it doesn't matter how many blocks you've got on your kid's phone, they've seen it. If they got a phone, they've seen it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? You know,
and
that's the reality of it.
They can start being more aware of it, you know, because awareness and admittance that there's a problem
Definitely.
is obviously
that's the first thing, you know. Stage. Otherwise, you're not doing anything. Do you know what I mean? So spreading it, you know, sharing, you know, educating people on it and letting them educate themselves is number one, really.
It's like if you want to figure out where you need to go, you need to figure out where you are first, don't you? You know, you need to know where you are in order to plot the course.
Yeah.
So, because the more and more you go down this rabbit hole, it's just no wonder you end up either crying yourself to sleep or end up with many sleepless nights, because it's just like,
it's difficult.
You're trying to lie in bed at night and you're thinking somewhere in the world, doesn't matter where it is, there's some young girl, whether it's, you know, just turned 18 maybe, or even younger, is being trafficked somewhere, is being held somewhere. Yeah. The other one that's like maybe in her early 20s has got a crippling drug addiction, and
it all leads back to pretty much the same thing. It's just people don't realise it, you know. They have to realise
that a lot of it is just, you know, rape on a screen. Yeah. And it's, you know, given the thinnest veneer of really nothing to say that it's consensual, and, you know, people just need that little bit of rationalization in their minds to then go be an avid consumer of it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's just, and then how much is glorified. The biggest problem is that, as well as how much is glorified and how many people are rewarded for it. People are going to do what they feel society or gets them monetary compensation.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the time. Yeah. And they don't end up finding the consequences till later on. Now you got some of the adult stars who are saying now, oh, can you like stop watching my stuff, or trying to get this stuff taken down.
They won't get it off there
because they've got kids now. It's
yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And OnlyFans is a testament to that as well, because, you know, you think you've got little kids and you're doing this. You think and there has been cases where like young boys have gone on there and seen their mother on there. It's just feeds into the incest thing as well then, doesn't it?
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I say one really last thing that I was going to touch on, more really for myself, with a recent conversation that I had, I mentioned this before we went on the air, was that how you got your start with all this was vaccine related.
Yeah.
Was it not? What's your opinions on, because I know things are very different versus how they are in the US versus how they are in the UK, and a lot of things you see from like American political commentators, sometimes in the UK, I'm guilty of it, we forget that they're talking about the US, whether it's vaccine schedules, whether it's all of their guidance, and a lot of the times, if, like, they're talking about the American economy, I can easily then think that it's the same thing over here, when in reality it could be very different. What's your overall opinion, stance on them, and how did you arrive to this stance first off?
Okay, I'll start here. You would have to kill me to get a vaccine injected into my child, number one. And the reason I came to that conclusion is like 16 years of research. But I knew this a long time ago. Obviously, my child is unvaccinated. She's never seen a doctor. She's nearly 16. She doesn't get ill. You'll find that common throughout anyway with unvaccinated versus vaccinated. But I was pregnant, and I was like 6 months pregnant, and I was sat on this, and I was going in to have my flu shot and everything, mind, the following week. I knew nothing about any of this. I was watching EastEnders. I remember what I was doing, watching EastEnders, playing a Sudoku game. Darren was in the other room, and he comes in and he goes, do you know what? There was some divine intervention because I was meant to have my flu jab and I won very well. So I phoned the doctor and I said, I'm not very well. And she said, I'll tell you what, don't come in now. Come in next week when you're better. So it was in between then and the thingy where I didn't have my flu shot in the end. But Darren came in from the workroom and he was like, I think we need to watch this together. He's only watched like 20 minutes of it. And I was like, okay. So anyway, we put it on. It was called Vaccinations. And within about 20 minutes, I was crying. Now, I was highly emotional because obviously I was 6 months pregnant. But I knew, even though I didn't know any details, like this is the first thing I'd seen of any of it, any sort of anti-stat. But I knew there was something seriously wrong with this whole thing. So from that moment, and I probably shouldn't have been doing this, but I couldn't sleep anyway. I was up until like 4 or 5 in the morning, just researching and reading studies, reading papers, reading comments. But I just couldn't get enough information in me. Do you know what I mean? I pulled all of the toxicology, found out the ingredients in them, pulled all the toxicology reports for each ingredient, went through all them. I was just like, there's no way she's having any of it. But it took a long time to work out how because the wise then kept saying, Darren, why aren't the doctors saying anything? I didn't know at that time that the doctors didn't actually learn about vaccines in their training. Do you know what I mean? That all came later, obviously. So it was over a period of time, and there was absolutely no need for any. When you get to a certain level, after you've done so much research, you're like, you don't even need them. You don't even need. They've lied so much about how disease is caused. The panacea for them, which they claim is vaccines, they even if they were full of water and saline and whatever, right, sugar pill or whatever, they still wouldn't be needed because disease is caused by overtoxicity, by toxins. So injecting more toxins into the body, especially heavy metals, carcinogens, formaldehyde, aluminium, mercury, most toxic substance known to man, or one of them, do you know what I mean? Animal DNA, human DNA. How on earth, when you think about that logically, take away all the conditioning, how on earth does that make you healthy or safe from anything else? So once you have that in mind, it's easy to see then I wouldn't have any vaccine ever. And, we're lucky. I say we're lucky here. They're not mandated. But what I do tell people, I say, look, you've got to do your own research because you can't go into the doctors and say, oh, Catherine said, blah, 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 blah. You need to understand it yourself for your own your own mind anyway. You have to satisfy your own mind. You're doing the right thing. So until you're educated enough to yourself, then you'll have the confidence to sort of argue against it and whatever. But yeah, every vaccine, when you go back historically, even to the very beginning with Edward Jenner, and realise that he actually poisoned his son and the neighbours, the milkmaid's son, and didn't even inoculate, because it was called inoculation, and didn't inoculate his second-born son because he hurt the first one. And they were, ironically, at that time called it MMR, but what it meant was mild mental retardation. That's what happened to his son, and he died of TB, which was linked to the smallpox vaccine anyway. So even the very first person who made them, he didn't vaccinate his second-born. Do you know what I mean? When you look into things like that, then you obviously have to go there's like we'd be here for hours if I was talking about the whole industry. But I researched all of the so-called pandemics, all of the so-called, epidemics that they had. And when you look behind the curtain, it's far, far different to what we've been told. But when you realise the same people who push them are the same people who own the whole education system. If they told doctors and nurses, they're given the schedule and told to follow it. They just assume all of them are safe and all the trials have been done and whatever. As an outsider, the general public think that all doctors and nurses know everything there is to know about them. They don't do a single bit on training on vaccines, none. And it's only later on when you learn that out of their own mouths. Andrew Wakefield would tell you. Do you know what I mean? You don't learn anything about them when you're doing your training, nothing. And I actually interviewed a doctor at the beginning of COVID. He was an American physician, and he did ask me to take it. I think he was getting hounded and whatever. And he realized he'd been a physician for like 17 years. And he was telling me, like, during COVID, he said he shut the door of his room, his office. He went down, opened the drawer, pulled out, I think it was the MMR vaccine. He said, whatever vaccine, He read the pack. He said he opened the pack. Been a physician for 17 years. He opened the package insert, read it, dropped it, and the realization kicked in. Everything he thought he knew was like, I've never read, in 17 years, I've never read a package insert. And they tell you on there what the side effects are, including death. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's your informed consent that they don't give you. So he then went on a mad, like, you know, what have I been doing type of thing? Because obviously he was making connections then to all the kids that were coming in and being vaccinated in his surgery and then coming back after because they've got issues. Do you know what I mean? Everything then started to make sense to him. But when we're programmed to the degree that we are, and we are programmed to a really strong degree, they don't make sense until something like that happens. Do you know what I mean? You can ask him, any mum who's lost a child or who've got severe autism who knew that their child was absolutely fine before they had the vaccine. Do you know what I mean? It's only then they realise. Before then, you just go along with it. Like I would have gone along with it. I was fully going to have my flu vaccine. My daughter would have had every jab on there if I hadn't seen that one documentary and then done my own due diligence and educated myself. Because it's not about whether or not it's hidden from us. It actually isn't. It's just what's propagated to us is something completely different from what their own documents say. Do you know what I mean? When you're looking behind the curtain and you're reading the studies and you're reading how the trials are done and you read the ingredients and you realise there's a vaccine compensation scheme in every government that quietly pays out for vaccine injured, you realise then that, you know, what you thought was the truth wasn't actually the truth. And that is where that's where my stance is. I wouldn't go near anyone. None of them do anything at all. But they're very good at scaring people into thinking that they do.
Yeah, because I'm thinking back to it, almost a little bit like to play devil's advocate, if you will, thinking back to when they first started, because I remember just talking before we were on the record, and at this present moment in time, given I have a lot of ignorance, right? Just a layman's understanding of it, and you know, just what is like either told to you by your GP or whoever else it may be, as many people's other understanding does. But I have a lot of skepticism, not even necessarily from like the even vaccine standpoint, but as I've talked about the government standpoint, about why in that Andy Wakefield that you mentioned in his conversation with Michael Knowles brought up that the British government changed it so you could only get the MMR vaccine, despite knowing that the individual vaccines have massive interferences with each other. So when you bring them all into this one thing and put them all in at the same time, well, they all have massive interferences with each other, and then they prohibited people from getting the vaccine separately if they wanted to. So parents, if they wanted to, if they weren't happy with the MMR vaccine, the whole thing where you bring them all together, at one point they could have gone, if they still wanted to, they wanted to give their, you know, informed consent to the three separately, they could have. Well, now they can't anymore, at least as far as I am aware. When you see how many other things that the government have perpetuated in terms of their corruption, in terms to put forward their own wants, usually with financial incentives and the massive conglomerates at the top that obviously don't really care about anything else other than money, then it at least provides the basis to be skeptical. A lot of people, the minute you show any skepticism, they're like, anti-vaxxer, you want to kill children, you don't care about the children's health. I'm like, no, I'm actually asking these questions because I really actually do care.
And do you know what? A lot
health.
of people who they call anti-vaxxers are actually ex-vaxxers because something happened. Do you know what I mean? They got like...
Who's a better critic of alcohol than who's the better critic of alcohol? Who's going to be the most critical of alcohol? Is the person who was formerly an alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's exactly the same as this. So they're calling you anti-vaxxers, not even... It's just, again, it's another weaponized term.
Yeah. Exactly. It's another scare tactic. I'm like, well, hang on. Why do they think that way? Because I'm talking to you now. We've talked for about just over 2 hours. I know that you're not a crack loon, you know, person who's writing all the stuff down on the walls like a mad person, you know, like a character in a video game or whatever that you know is off their rocker. So for you to have come to this a viewpoint is obviously something which, at the very least, you've done a lot of reading and research into. And if I'm at least being fair, obviously, as a person that's having this conversation with you, but also wanted to understand, I should at least be able, and trust myself as well, to take what you were telling me, to then also go and read about it myself and to come to my own informed judgment as well. You know, because there's always more to learn out there with regards to these things.
Yeah.
Do you think that it was always this way? So I'm very skeptical at the moment with regards to the vaccine schedule, some of the things which they put it in, how much they try to force people to have, particularly in America. They have this massive debate going on at the moment. And think about it, if it was an open and shut case, you wouldn't really have this massive debate that's going on. You wouldn't also have the obstruction to really want to research it earnestly. So a big thing with RFK at the moment in America that I've noticed is that he wants to actually really research it and seems to want to earnestly research it and let the truth stand as it is, right? There's a lot of pushback to that. There's a lot of pushback to that, to even having the research done. I'm like, why? Why are you trying to stop the research from coming out? Do you think, however, that when vaccines and immunizations were first coming around, so an example being polio, for example, the polio vaccine, which is one that stands out in my mind, do you think that, say, the researchers who were formulating things like the polio vaccine, the smallpox vaccine, do you think that they were thinking that way at the time, or do you think that they actually really wanted to help people?
I couldn't tell you. Maybe, I mean, later on in their lives. So, for example, Edward Jenner ended up being part of the Royal Society, so he was given a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? So you had a money incentive. Maybe at the very beginning, when he was rubbing cowpox into wounds and saying they didn't have smallpox anymore, perhaps, I don't know. In the case of polio, though, by this time they fully knew what was going on there. You know, Jonas Salk even said, you know, he's the. Over here, you had Albert Sabin in America and Jonas Salk over here, which were both, you know, running for the polio vaccine, and they knew. Even Jonas Salk actually said there's more people die of the vaccine than they do of polio. So they knew at that point, but by that point they'd been championing them so much that they run them out anyway. Like Eisenhower in America at that time, he was like, you know, he'd done this big speech about how they were going to stamp down on polio and whatever, but vaccines didn't eradicate polio. What they did was reclassify it. So much like they did with COVID and the flu, and they've just reclassified. They do this all the time, by the way, right? What they were doing with polio, they were saying if anyone after the vaccine, so when the vaccine rolled out, they said anyone who comes in with polio-like symptoms who haven't had the vaccine, were you to diagnose, this is every doctor, every licensed doctor, which was most of them by then, you were to diagnose as polio. If they came in and they had the vaccine but still had polio-like symptoms, they were to diagnose it as aseptic spinal meningitis. So effectively, what you're doing when you're looking at statistics, it does look like polio went out. But if you have a look at aseptic spinal meningitis, which was unheard of before the polio vaccine, so the cases of polio gradually go to none. And then the cases of aseptic spinal meningitis are off the chart way before the polio cases, before they ran the vaccine out. So what they did is they reclassified the disease. So today, what they would call polio is actually aseptic spinal meningitis, Bell's palsy, cerebral palsy, anything with paralysis, Guillain-Barré syndrome. These are all diseases that are polio-like symptoms, but they are polio. It's just that they can use that, and they do. Whenever you said it, that one rings out in your mind, because over the years you would have seen polio was eradicated and smallpox was eradicated. So those two are people's arguments. A lot of the time when they don't really know, they'll say, what about smallpox? What about polio? Well, polio
I mean,
gone anyway.
tuberculosis was an example that came up earlier, so we got rid of that. Now we've seen that cases are coming back up in the UK with
and they'll just call it something else.
Again.
That's why you've got all these different names for it. Essentially, it's all one thing. So polio symptoms was initially caused by pesticide poisoning, DDT, lead arsenate. They were spraying them all over the place. That's what they were caused by. But instead of looking at where the toxin was, they said, oh, there's a virus flying around and you need this vaccine. And they've created this whole... And the vaccines are the backbone of the pharmaceutical industry. Because what they do is they maim people. So they go in there and become a customer see?
That Andy Wakefield interview said that it was around the time, I think, I can't remember what the exact context was. For you guys watching in post, I'll put the relevant clip up because I clipped this and put it on my Rumble and YouTube channels. The conversation basically when he was going through his period of, I think he was kicked out of the Royal Society.
Demonisation, they proper really done.
The phrase that he heard to describe the thought process behind what was going on with the vaccine was like, do you think that we're really going to be left with an orphan drug? You know, so like we're just going to, regardless what happens, it's been developed. If you think we're going to stop it now because of safety concerns, you think we're going to be left with an orphan drug after everything that's gone in? No, we're just going to chuck it in.
And all they do then is they just send them over. So they sent a big batch to Brazil. They had a bad batch of MMR vaccines back in the 90s, I think it was. They didn't get rid of them. They just shipped them off to Brazil.
And the thing is, you can have this conversation as well even if our stance is slightly may differ just based on my level of understanding at the moment and all the information that I've learned here now, I can at least acknowledge that there is a tremendous precedent for all of this to take place because of government corruption that we've seen, because of financial incentives, because of power incentives. You could get called all manner of things: anti-vaxxer, science denier. Think of all the people that got called science deniers because of the COVID vaccine, and they were completely right. And they were pulling bloody xenomorph things out of people's, veins, the big white clots that look like something out of the Alien films. I was like, I didn't see any of that until much later on afterwards. Probably until about when I first started doing this, probably around 2024, I first started learning about that, or late 2023 when I first logged onto X was when I first saw one of these giant clots come out. But like, why didn't BBC tell me about this? Why is Sky News telling me about this? Why didn't
start to realise that you're being lied to, or at least omitted information by, they're not giving you information. I can only imagine being one
of the undertakers, like John O'Looney, I think is a pretty prominent example on social media. I wanted to get him on the podcast. I reached out to him. Sadly, he didn't get back to me, but he posted one of these videos of some of the things that he'd literally pulled out of people, because obviously it's the industry that he's in. And I'm just like imagining the effect that has on... It was like it's completely silent going on. Nobody knew that it was going on, because it's in the confines of like an Undertaker studio. But I'm like, he's going in there, he's pulling this stuff out. I can only imagine the effect that has on someone's psyche, especially when then any notion of being critical of it, any notion of being anything less than, dear God, thank the NHS, thank the government for all of their stuff and putting this out there, that they're nothing less than heroes. They've been responsible for some of the biggest atrocities that we've seen in the last 5 years.
Exactly. So there's cause to even look,
to those who call good evil and evil good. But you so much as look, you're a conspiracy theorist,
and
anti-vaxxer.
That's when you know that you should be looking. When you see those little weaponized words being thrown at you, you're on the right track.
You don't take flack unless you're over the target, do you? That's the thing. You don't take flack unless you're over the target. And, if people are going on like me or you, whoever it is, for asking honest questions and wanting honest, earnest answers, well, then that is an admission in and of itself. That's an admission, at least in and of itself, that people should be looking more into this area, and certainly not just taking whatever the government says or whatever. Look at all the celebrity doctors that went on at the height of COVID, said, oh yeah, it's so good, it's so safe, so effective, and all of this stuff. And how many of them are now in hot water, potentially with massive legal trouble, potentially looking at prison, because they echoed these lies on mainstream media platforms, and people had all kinds of complications because of it. And it was the COVID vaccine that really highlighted it for me, particularly with the lies that were told around. That's why I hate it so much that the government preyed on people's families again, because they said, get it because it'll keep your family members safe. You won't transmit it. Another lie.
They do that a lot.
Another lie. And I had
guilt tripping you.
My father is heavily immunocompromised, so he has a COPD and bronchitis and other things. Not bronchitis, emphysema. And is getting on in age, so I'm thinking, well, I want to protect him. And, maybe it had a small effect for elderly populations, but the fact they rolled it out to, youngsters and everything like that, and they were getting all kinds of bonuses or whatever it was, trying to bribe people to get it.
Well, they were offering them donuts and stuff at one point in America. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Victoria Rickson said that someone she know or herself, I can't remember who it was, but they tried to bribe her essentially with a bacon roll. You know what I mean? And it's like...
Crazy.
The other thing is, you've got to think, people, again, having accountability for themselves. If that's all it takes for you to get you to buy into something, that somebody gave you a free bacon roll and you trade potentially large parts of your health away.
It's just nuts.
That says a lot as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they want to stay asleep though, don't they?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. A lot of people, they want to stay asleep.
Ignorance is bliss for the ignorant.
Yeah, exactly. And those who then, it's like Plato's Cave. Have you ever seen the allegory of Plato's Cave?
Yeah.
It's like the government are trying to do everything possible to keep people stuck in the bottom of the cave. Whoever makes it out the top of the cave, they get called the conspiracy theorists and the science deniers.
And the rest of them don't want it.
Yeah, and it's the government that are in the little trench with the hooded figures and the little
absolutely,
the figures and whatever else, casting this illusion. It's like Plato, how his concepts have transcended, the last several thousand years. What's the old saying about ancient wisdom and stuff like that? I can't remember the saying, but looking at the lessons of the past, especially looking back in the past, that you could see how a lot of the concepts that people, even thousands of years ago, how they still stand strong today. People won't even look across to other countries that have these similar problems and be like, oh, well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe I should be paying attention.
Yeah.
You know, but no, I appreciate you elaborating on that, because it was a conversation I had recently. It's not personal for me, but it harks to something that's personal for me as well, because you mentioned meningitis earlier. That was something I came down with, bacterial meningitis, in 2023, and I came very close to losing. I came very close to losing my life. I had to be taken into a coma, and luckily, obviously, I'm here to still tell the tale. But they were asking me at the time, has he had his meningitis vaccine? I can't remember if I ever did. Normally, if I'm not mistaken, at least in the public school system, is something you get when you're a teenager, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm wondering now, looking back on it, would it have actually made that much of a difference?
No.
Would it have potentially made things
Probably
worse?
would have given it to you.
Would it have made things worse? I'm just wondering. Like,
a lot of the time, what they're vaccinating you against would be a side effect anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, but along with a load of other side effects on top of it, like,
because I had a bunch of things. They turned septic as well, and obviously that's another complication as well. The fact that it turned septic and stuff like that. But I'm just wondering, how much of a difference would it actually have made? Because
wouldn't have made any difference.
Because the biggest things that I think people want is that obviously they want a magic pill for things.
Yeah.
They want a syringe to give them the answer to all their problems or whatever. But because they literally said how I was able to recover so quickly, in terms of especially the physical rehabilitation that came later on, as I was bedbound on ICU for just over a week, was the fact that I just kept myself healthy.
Yeah.
You know, I've been a fitness instructor for years. I was training heavily in BJJ at the time, always keeping myself relatively healthy and fit. And so they said that in large part, that's what it was. And I think people need to realize as well, not just the medical, if anything, if there is going to be a benefit to it, it's only going to benefit on what you have in the present. So if you don't already have a healthy lifestyle, you know, people who use multivitamins or vitamin D, whatever it is, it's only going to add to whatever's there. So if you don't already have the bedrock of like a healthy lifestyle and whatever else, whether it's because, you know, you don't eat a healthy enough diet in terms of like micronutrients and protein and your veg and all the rest of it. Obviously people have different, you know, things of what they deem as healthy and not. But if you're not keeping yourself in a healthy state with regards to exercise and taking care of your mental health, obviously exercise being tremendous with regards to that as well, it's like whatever you're getting from any kind of medication is only going to, it can only work with what's there.
Yeah,
so I think
it's not a magic bullet at the end of the day.
People need to think about, before they start thinking about a lot of these things as well, taking the accountability for what's going on in their own lives as well, and looking at their own lifestyles and making sure.
And they would find then, if they did all that, they wouldn't need the meds. That is the case.
And freak things can happen, like it happened with me. Freak things can happen, but that can happen whether you're vaccinated or not. And it's no telling that a syringe, something in a syringe is going to save you.
No,
you know?
Absolutely.
One thing I do want to stress, just for the camera, I should have done this at the start. None of this is to be taken as medical advice. None of this is to be taken as medical advice. You should always...
Educational purposes only.
And for informational and to tend you down a rabbit hole of research, hopefully. But none of this is to be taken as medical advice. I am not a medical professional in position to be doing that, so please do not take this as medical advice. I do not want to be hearing that you've dragged my name inside of a courtroom. Thank you ever so much. One last thing, Catherine, just before we finish up, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Where do you see things trending in the future? Everything, in terms of the RSC, in terms of the overall Welsh state in particular, but also the British state, in terms of how that's going, in terms of how they're trying to basically go to war with parents and the family, other things like the medical industry. Where do you see things overall heading in the sort of near and far future?
Well...
Or should I say, are you optimistic or pessimistic about it?
I want to be optimistic. Don't get me wrong, it will get worse. I totally believe it's going to get worse. But at the same time, I'm hoping that, there's a lot of people that have definitely woken up to whatever it may be, whatever has made them realize that we're being royally lied to and that they need to do research on whatever avenue they've gone down, they're going to get to the same place. So I believe, from that perspective, we could have a little bit of pushback against it, which would be, what we want. But at the same time, the people who control the world know this and they will up their game as well. So things, I really don't know. All I'm going to keep doing is carry on spreading the truth, carry on, sort of exposing the lies that we've been told and, and just praying that somehow that will work together eventually for us to build a better life. But I do see this year in particular, I think it's going to be a bit of a wild one, a bit of a roller coaster.
Think so?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a case of more and more people are going to be waking up this year, and that's going to start exponentially increasing.
Yeah.
So we're all along for this roller coaster, is that the way you see it going? It's going to be a roller coaster.
Yeah, so buckle up. But I think maybe, in the end, good will prevail.
I certainly think so. Anything coming up for you guys with Public Child Protection Wales and anything like that this year that maybe people would like to be aware of, and maybe they can go and see if they can support you and
we've
stuff?
got, on the 24th of February, we've got our first demo in a year and a half for outside. We haven't, we've been tied up with other things, so we haven't actually done an outdoors demo in a while, but we have got one, and we got a march from Cardiff Castle to the Senedd on the Tuesday the 24th of February. So have a look at the website for details on that. I think it's 12 o'clock we're leaving the castle. Then on the 18th of April, we've got our annual conference, which is in the Newport area. So tickets are on sale for that now on Eventbrite. If you go to the website and have a look, that'll be really great, because we've got them coming over from the International Task Force. So we got Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, I believe, as well.
Do you reckon we can get a Voice of the Valley's press pass? Do you reckon?
Oh, you can get a press pass.
Yes!
Of course you can. You can come in. That's absolutely fine.
And that's on the record. You guys have seen it. That's on the record.
So, yeah, we got that on the 18th. We got quite a few things. We've got a bill to present as well. We've got our usual fundraisers. We do like a 12-hour skate-a-thon we do on Aberavon Beach in the summer to raise money. We've got our Michael Bublé night coming up in November. We've got lots of cases as well. And, we've got a lot of things in the pipeline. So keep posted. But in terms of short term, 24th of February, 18th of April, keep those in mind. They're the two nearest ones, I believe, that we've got going on.
And are you able to talk about the bills that that I've been in talks with you guys with about the things that you're doing, or is there things you're keeping under wraps for the moment to bring forward a little bit later on?
If you can probably, I can't remember if it's on the website or not, but we have got a bill that we want to put forward for child protection, very similar to the bill that was raised that Judith Reisman had a while ago against Alfred Kinsey. So it's like a protection children thingy, but we can elaborate on that again. But I think you'll probably find details of it on Public Child Protection Wales anyway on the website.
Perfect. And it'll all be linked down below, ladies and gentlemen, as well as Catherine's website and any other things which she wants me to link down there as well. You'll also find her business down there. Last most important question. Last most important one. What is Catherine Watkins's favourite pizza topping?
Favourite pizza topping?
This is a question somebody asked in the YouTube chat as a little bit of a joke.
Quite boring, really, with that. Really, I don't really like pizza. I don't mind it. It's just something I wouldn't choose. So, I don't know, pepperoni?
There we go.
Pepperoni. There we go.
That's a good choice. That's a very, very good choice. So, thank you very much for watching, listening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you found that useful and enjoyed it. I know I certainly did. Make sure you check down below for Catherine's business or website and updates with regards to what's going to be happening with Public Child Protection Wales this year. Certainly grateful to be along for that ride. Have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, good night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. And you take care now. Godspeed, ladies and gentlemen.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my conversation with Associate Researcher, Public Child Protection Wales, Catherine Watkins. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you found it useful. So many things that we talked about in there. Another disclaimer, ladies and gentlemen, nothing that we discussed in this episode today is to be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a medical professional, your medical professional, before making any decisions that could impact you or anybody else that you are responsible for. No joke, this is not to be taken as medical advice. That being said, I want to know your biggest takeaway from this episode today, whether it's talking about Kinsey, whether it's talking about the intelligence agencies, whether it was vaccines, whether it was pornography, whether it was the stories of the state overreach at the very start of the episode. What was your biggest takeaway? Let me know down in the comments. Make sure to go and follow Catherine and Public Child Protection Wales, what they are doing. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. You take care, and I will see you again very, very soon. Godspeed.